Let's stand for the flag salute. Or that aren't on the agenda.
Brady Freeham. So first I'm going to protest that Mr. Kausner and Mr. Rosengard should not be on the commission because they publicly lied. The next item is the moving of the police station, which this planning commission denied or overruled, and then went to city council. And there was a little bit of appeal, and now city has said they're not going to move forward with that little bit of appeal. So I would assume that it's going to come back here again. And I am encouraging this commission to start at ground zero. The police station has been a boondoggle from the beginning. And frankly, we don't need a new police station. We need storage. And we need some remodeling. The other day, the council president Chilton talked to the employee of the year, who is the new safety officer for the city, and said, "Oh, when you went to the police station, I'm sure you found multiple issues with the police station and safety." And he goes, "No, I went to the police station. It had some mold and a broken fan cover, and I fixed them both." So the lie about the police station falling apart is just simply not true. Number one, and number two, there's also the lie about individual locker rooms for the female one officer that we have. That's also a patent lie. We do in fact have separate changing room for her. And most importantly, what we need is storage. If you've actually been to the police station, we need storage. We can build a storage unit for fractions of the $30 million it will cost us to build a new station. And so when it comes back, I think that you should investigate starting at ground zero. And in addition, I also found out recently that the county has offered to let you co-locate at the jail and build onto the jail. And again, that would be fractions of what a new police station would cost, because the infrastructure is there. You don't need rooms, you don't need showers, you don't need changing rooms. They already exist there at the jail for the sheriff's deputies. All you would need is office space. The jail was built to be modular, and you can easily add on space to the jail. So if we're going to actually build the station, associating it with the county at the current location is obviously the cheapest choice. The cheapest choice, I think, is to remodel it in the current location. But if you choose that, there's another option to locate it at the jail. Certainly, we do not need to spend $30 million on a new spot at a new location. And I'm hoping that you guys will see that when it eventually comes back for you, which will probably be sooner than we think. And then I don't see it on here, but my hopeful is that, I mean, I do see it that you've added it, the Plaza Square. So happy. Hope that goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you. No one else? Anybody have any comments on the minutes from last meeting? Corrections, sir. Right. You have a motion to accept them.
So
Second. How do you vote?
Aye.
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 Okay. Time is now 6:05 p.m. and the public hearing is now open. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for an annexation. Public property is identified in the county assessor's map as lot 1000 on map 4N1W8D. The applicant is Sean Clark. The owner is the Board of Columbia County. Because quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter? I delineated this property about 20 years ago.
I don't know if I've got 30 years. I don't think I have bias, but I am good friends with Sean Clark. I don't see how that would affect my opinion, but I just want to make sure it's get it out there.
Okay. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte communications or site visits? Is anyone from the audience object to the ability of the commissioner to make a fair decision on this particular issue? Okay. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: require statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and decision. Following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code and ORS 197.7975. Following the list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.08.040, 17.28.030, and 17.112.030. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing in person or in writing, or failing to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to ALUBA. The Land Use Board of Appeals on issue precludes an action for damages to circuit court. Fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Carey. So yeah, we're looking at an annexation tonight, a couple of them. This is the first of three.
Helpful to move the screen so we can see it.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
So,
You have to look behind you.
let's see about back in our bold heads.
So this property, it's a little hard to see the lines. The tax lot line here.
That's better, thank you.
But it's a U shape, kind of following my cursor here. It's large. It's 11.84 acres. Most notably, it has this blue big barn looking structure and a shop next to it that you can see from Old Portland Road. So the property owner, the port, filed a consent to annex because they want to connect to city utilities, which is a typical reason to file one. So Jacob reviewed a land use approval with the county for a 10,000 or so square foot maintenance building for the Port of Columbia County. So that's already been approved in the county. The property also has a significant portion is in the 100-year floodplain. So this kind of like tree lined area is the property slopes pretty heavily towards the back. And there's also a locally significant wetland that has a 75-foot upland protection zone on the back side of that property. The port's maintenance facility stays high and dry. It's kind of where my cursor's wiggling around here. The proposal for the maintenance building shares access with that driveway that exists off Old Portland Road and serves those blue buildings that are already there. So that's a little bit about the property. As with all annexations, we send notice to other utility providers. The county commented that they didn't have any concerns. County Public Works said they didn't have any concerns with the annexation. There's no county roads involved. Old Portland Road is the city jurisdiction in this area. So we look at the quasi judicial amendment standards. There's nothing notable or worth pointing out in the staff report for those. You know, the annexation meets all of the comprehensive plan requirements and all of the addendums to the comprehensive plan. So those are met. With annexations, we also have to meet the transportation planning rule compliance, which means that we look at the current zoning of the property, which is Columbia County Heavy Industrial or M1, and the city's zoning option given annexation is heavy industrial. So those two uses have very similar transportation, trip generation, and so there isn't a need to do further analysis for transportation impacts. So that's met. Then we look at our annexation criteria, which includes an analysis of utilities. City water is available in Old Portland Road. That's partly why they are consenting to annex. We have water capacity to be able to serve this property. Sewer, the property is currently not connected to sewer, but it is also available in Old Portland Road. And as you all know, we adopted a sewer wastewater master plan in 2021, and it identified sewer conveyance deficiencies. And so as part of Jacob's review of the county file, the land use decision, he included a condition or a recommended condition that there is a fair share fee paid proportional to the development that the port would be responsible for paying at the time of the building permitting. And it's that we haven't seen a building permit yet for that. They're still working on it. We want to make sure that that's also incorporated in annexation. So there's one recommended condition of approval, and it's just that the port pays that fair share fee. Any questions about that? That's kind of the unique thing with this annexation is that fair share fee. There's a bunch of findings related to sewer because of that, about a page finding for that. Moving on. So the city's comprehensive plan designation is currently unincorporated heavy industrial or UIH. And the only option for zoning upon annexation for this is heavy industrial. And then we would also make the comprehensive plan designation heavy industrial incorporated instead of unincorporated. So pretty simple zoning. And that's all I have.
It's just annexation, not a development plan, but just another little added idea, item. The wetlands and the floodplain areas in southwest, southeast area. It's also a mitigation site for those in the south portion. Right against the property line. Southwest, southwest.
Was it for development in this area or mitigation from an offsite thing?
Can't remember, actually. I did the comprehensive or the conceptual design for it, but another firm actually did it. It's for the port
Kind of a cool property back in there. Yeah.
years ago.
Been
Huge.
doing nothing for a long time.
Yeah.
I kayaked up right behind it. Oh. Well, doesn't Milton Creek come onto the property in the northeast corner? Or crosses the underneath the Old Portland Road?
I know it's very wet back there. I don't know if it's Milton.
City owns some property there somewhere, right, with the well?
I think that's a little further up.
Okay,
It's closer to,
that's where the creek is.
yeah. I don't think we're quite there yet, yeah. We do have Miriam is on Zoom. Well, are there any other questions for me before we?
I have a question. Is there any testing for archaeological remains on this? There's a lot of archaeology around that area. So I'm wondering with the permitting process, if that'll be a condition to it.
It's a good question. I've only ever seen those conditions when there's federal funding involved. I don't know what the port's funding sources are. If you have anything to say to that, but
And it's not one of the known sites that we can't disclose. We do have some sites that are kept in the vault. But this is not one of them. Of course, I don't know how good.
Triggered with the federal action, federal permitting.
And presumably if they find something while they're working, that triggers various obligations anyway, right?
Yeah, the other time that it's come up was for, it's now known as Greystone Estates. And, I guess there was some history of it there. That predates both Jenny and I. And when the subdivision came back through, that question came up again. Because a citizen brought it up because of their family history. And I think they, as kids, remembered getting arrowheads, which is a classic artifact. But in a sense of that being a proactive condition, that would be atypical.
It is a, relatively untouched green field, so it is, has some sensitivity to it.
It's such a sharp slope at the edge of that field that it almost looks a little artificial.
Pops off there.
Yeah. So the 100 or floodplain, the wetland boundary is much the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, like it could have been filled.
Still a pretty good slope.
Yeah, it was up it. Okay. There's no applicant here.
She's on Zoom. I just want to give her the opportunity.
Yeah, sorry. Great, so that,
Miriam, did you want to add anything as the applicant?
I hope you can hear me. I've been having technical difficulties. Oh, good, good. Thank you for reviewing our application and we hope you find it favorably. It does meet within the criteria that we've applied for the annexation, in our opinion, as you have also stated. With regards to the historical findings, of course, if we needed to put in or create an inadvertent discovery plan, we can do that, if that helps. But I think it's been pretty well explained what the project is for. So if you have any questions, let me know, but thank you again.
thank you. Any testimony in support of the application? Any testimony, neutral testimony? Or oppositional testimony? Okay. Any other further questions of staff or the applicant? The public record is now closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decisions. This is a recommendation to the city council. So these annexations are often pretty straightforward. Remember, we're not recommending a development there. We're just recommending an annexation.
I would recommend to annex it with that fair use fee, I think that addresses any concerns that would be lingering.
Do a second?
Second.
What do you vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you. I don't have to sign it. It's a recommendation.
Nope. Yeah, it'll go before council.
Good, so there.
19th will be the second.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Have a good night.
Now, can we do this one yet? No. It's now 6:19 PM. The public hearing is now open. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for an annexation. Subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 100 on map 4N1W and 9BB. The applicant is JLJ Movers LLC. The owner is the same. Consequently, judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities. We will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter? I retired in my former career, I was reviewing their permit application for a development there. I did not make the final decision on it. Does any member of the commission wish to declare any ex parte communications or site visits? Anyone from the audience object to the ability of the commissioner to make a fair decision on this matter? Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: statement, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close the record, deliberations and decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code and ORS 197.7975. Following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.08.040, 17.28.030, and 17.112.030. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as prescribed, or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue, precludes action for damages in circuit court. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, this annexation is on Gable Road. And we looked at, a similar property. It's one that abuts this one, on the east side where John L. Jersey is at, and basically he wants to expand. In fact, he's wanted to expand ever since he moved there, when he moved there from, Scappoose. That he got up where it was at, because there's some development happening there. And this annexation is a little different than normal. Usually we're talking about a connection to utility. Every once in a while, we talk about it being the desire to use the city's development rules, and that's what this one is about. So it's close to 4 acres. There is a large wetland on it that the applicant may or may not fill if they want to deal with requirements to do so. Not significant for the purposes of the annexation, just interesting tidbits. It's partially developed with a fence that was installed in 2017. And for those of you who have been here for a long time, more than 10 years or so, you may remember it was the location of I think it was a pink house that was sat there in a state of disrepair for a long time. It was raised, and I remember it because I remember someone talking about the joke. It was the $1 million pink house because it was large, non-residential property. The house didn't look very good. That was demoed. It sat vacant for a long time. Come 2017. Now, in 2017, I'm trying to remember what happened. I think some fence poles went up. We're like, what's going on here? And so we talked to the county, because it was in the county. And so we're probably started a little early. And we told the owners at the time, who were not John L. Jersey, that, hey, we need land use approval to vacant site. And there was some effort to start that with the county, but ultimately that application was withdrawn. And so there's really no land use approval for the site. And that was back in 2017. And this is a site that we drive by all the time because it's on a busy road. And years go by, and the county is asked to fill out a land use compatibility statement for a DEQ. That's required if you're disturbing more than an acre of ground. So it's an indication of something that's gonna happen. And we've been in communication with the county about this property since, and they note that, hey, this doesn't give you land use approval. So towards the end of last year, we started seeing some storage activity expand at the site. So what's going on? And that resulted in some dialogue and stuff. And so John Jersey, basically to establish this site as a storage use would have to go through a public hearing process through the county. And that's something that they want to avoid. Some people just don't like public hearings. Don't know why, we're here every month for them. And so his decision was just to go ahead and annex, deal with our process for a storage site, which doesn't require public hearing, at least normally unless appealed or something like that. So that's really the purpose of this annexation. And then it's good for the city because we're kind of cleaning up a sort of a messy situation. And part of that situation is when that fence was installed, I wanted to, because I wasn't sure what was gonna happen, but what I did want to have a situation where we had a fence and it just completely disregarded our access standards, because Gable Road is still a city road. And we weren't able to have that indentation with the fence. But John does propose on moving that and emulating a similar access that he had on the site to the east. So there's some stuff that he wants to do. And that's just more for interest rather than the annexation, except we do have a condition about access. So if we look at the surrounding zoning, generally it's industrial, except for the multi-family property to the south, which is now commercial. There's all the stuff we're supposed to look at, which is all pretty much met. We don't have a lot of zoning choices. Basically, light industrial is the zoning that we go with based on a comprehensive plan designation. It abuts city limits on multiple sides, so that's a box that's very easy to check. The one condition that we are posing is that any Gable Road access point, including the one in use at the southwest corner of the subject property, requires approval by the city and associated improvements, including but not limited to paving prior to use. Without such, it's contrary to the condition and applicable city law. I think we have someone who is honorable and wants to comply. I don't think we'll need to use that as extra leverage. But I always like to have it in case we need it. So that's just based on that access curb bubble. Otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward one. We're just adding to our collection of properties around here. We ask that you recommend approval of this to the council with the light industrial zoning, light industrial comprehensive plan designation, and the active condition as I mentioned.
One thing we didn't do in the last hearing was if you could point out the city limits, city properties are already incorporated.
Sure, yeah.
Everything colored.
So that
Yeah, so if it's this stipple pattern, the stipple pattern and the color indicates the comprehensive plan designation outside the city. And so you have this light gray, which is the light gray designation. Any solid color, as you can see here, here, is in city limits. And so it's almost an island. If this was annexed, it would be an island. So it very much abuts all these properties. Interestingly, walking back here, no fence has been installed here. They will propose to do that. You know, from a crime prevention standpoint, that's kind of a path for people who I mean, I have the kindest things in their mind. But anyways, solid color with this anyway.
Thanks.
Can you just clarify or explain why you included this email exchange between people?
Yeah, because that was our evidence to show, hey, this application was withdrawn. There was no actual land use established.
Makes sense.
And it's something I saved at the time because I was kind of worried about how this property would evolve. Based on the conversations we had in 2017. And so part of it's just keeping the paper trail in case it's needed. Sure. But John's been good to work with it, so you know, I think we'll get it all cleaned up and live happily ever after.
I know it's not part of our decision, but has been no, I think you indicated that, has been no application for any type of development there with the city. Or no development plan.
We do have a site design review for a storage site.
But that's your administrative, okay.
Yeah, and it'll be contingent upon annexation, and that's, you know, what we talked to them about.
I just didn't know if you are processing that administrative role or going to, or just this is setting up for some future.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for the staff? This applicant here or on Zoom? Anybody who wants to testimony in support of the application? Or neutral testimony or opposing the application? Is there any final questions? None.
What property are you addressing?
An annexation at 180 Gable Road.
Making sure it wasn't what we were here for. It's not.
All right, the public record is now closed and the matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decision. Okay. Yeah. You guys want to talk about?
I think they have quite a long piece of the property they already have developed. It looks fantastic. Cleaned up and everything, and I would suspect they would do the same. This seems straightforward. Kind of needs to be there. And obviously did a nice job.
I think the provision about the Gable Road access takes care of, you know, the only weird wrinkle with this site, so sure.
Except for the big wetland.
Yeah, we'll cross that bridge when they put it in development. plan.
That's a different.
Yeah.
It's a significant cost of it.
But the wetland's not significant to the city.
Yeah.
And so that's gonna be more between the owner and state.
It's not under the federal government's jurisdiction either. Okay, anybody have a motion? Accept the conditions as recommendations.
Yeah, I move that we accept the planning department's proposal with the condition.
Second.
Vote.
Aye.
I
Okay. Just over the time. That's great. Time is now 6:34 and the public hearing is now open. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for an annexation. The subject property is identified in the county assessor's map as lot 1900 on map 4N1W86A. The applicant is Christine Dahlgren. The owner is Dahlgren Living Trust. Because quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter? None? Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte communications or site visits? Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision on this? Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows. Required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and decisions. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code ORS 197.7975. The following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.08.040, 17.28.030, and 17.112.030. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described, or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. All right. Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Awesome, so we're looking at a 1 acre property. This is on East Division, just off the highway here. So this is Dahlgren's Building Supply. You turn up East Division and then the property's on the left. So this property owner filed a consent to annex quite some time ago. They had a failing septic, and so they needed to connect to city sewer rapidly. So the property is developed with a detached single family dwelling, and it's got a detached shop. Interestingly, there are two developed accesses from East Division Road. One of them goes to the house, and then the other one just kind of goes to what looks like a building pad. There may have been a structure there at some time, but it's no longer there. So just curiosity. There's developed curb and gutter along this property already. There's obviously a public sanitary sewer line that they've since connected to after filing the consent to annex, located on Division. So we sent this out. Columbia County Land Development Services had no concerns. County also had no concerns. They did say that if this property has any development in the future that triggers a building permit, they'll need to obtain an access permit because this is a county road. On East Division Road there. So the current zoning of the property is Columbia County C3, and the city zoning in our comprehensive plan is unincorporated highway commercial. You can kind of see, it's a little harder to see on this map than in your packet, but this is kind of the dividing line for commercial property. The rest of this is all that yellow stipple that's residential. So all of this is unincorporated highway commercial. The adjacency to city limits is a little bit weirder in this case. So state statute says that if you're abutting just through right of way or bodies of water, I think is the other thing, it's considered contiguous next to city limits. And so there's this little notch out here on this property. So if you just follow that right of way, right on up, you're contiguous with city limits. Another more complicated to cross the highway. This is all right of way. And then this is also in city limits across the highway here. So that's how we pull this property in and meet that criteria. So for the transportation planning rule, you know, it's commercial to commercial. Looking at worst case scenario, there isn't really an impact on the transportation system, so that's met. The property's already connected to McNulty Water, so we don't need to look at our city water capacity. So with the connection issue, you know, they needed to connect to city sewer very quickly. If this property were ever redeveloped in the future with a site development review or a land division, like a partition, at that time, we would consider doing the fair share proportional fee to cover any sewer conveyance issues that might exist at that time. For an existing single family dwelling, it doesn't trigger that fair share fee.
Really?
Or duplex, because we can't treat duplexes any differently, so state law, so. So that's why you don't see that condition in here. The staff report also notes that detached single-family dwellings are not allowed uses in the city's highway commercial zone. They're also not allowed uses in the county's C3 zoning, so it's a non-conforming use now. It will continue to be a non-conforming use once it's annexed into the city, so no change there, but the staff report notes that. We mentioned this, it's unincorporated highway commercial. We recommend annexing, zoning it highway commercial upon annexation, and that the comp plan would be highway commercial incorporated.
Yeah.
No other notable things.
Any questions for staff? Okay, is the applicant here and want to make a presentation? You don't have to. Is there anyone of you wants to give testimony in support of the application? Anyone that has a neutral testimony, not in favor or really against the proposal? Anybody have testimony in opposition to the application? Here for interest, I think. All right, does the commission have any final questions? None. The public record is now closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decision. Look forward to me. Yeah.
See why they need it to happen quickly.
It's a weird connection to the city.
Yeah.
Had them straight across the street before, but. Well, does anyone make a motion to accept the conclusion and recommendations of staff? Second?
Second.
You vote?
Aye.
Aye.
You were done. I think I have it read in the last ones is the final written decision of the planning commission. No, we don't do that. It's our decision. That's right. Okay, that's it. Pass it.
Some of these annexations, we sat on a little bit longer, for a variety of reasons. We had them all like, oh, okay, let's try to get all these at the same time to be efficient.
Yeah. Okay. So the next. Wait a couple minutes for the posted time. Those couple of minutes. Any
Make note that we're actually ahead of schedule.
yeah, here for information items you can talk about in a minute or two.
Do you have any FYI items, so you can cover that now?
Yeah, there was, and Brady kind of hinted this. I don't know how many of you were aware of the special session the council had last week about the police station matter. But interestingly, because of all the time that had elapsed and we were at, the council kind of had a tough choice on their hands. Because apparently we just can't withdraw the application from the Land Use Board of Appeals. The law isn't clear on that, and so that would have potentially been murky. So they were in a position where they keep the record as it is, go forth of LUBA, and maybe we'll have a decision by the end of the year and who knows where it would go. Could it be remanded? Or abandon that effort and think of something else. And the most efficient way to abandon it was to deny it. And that's what the council ended up doing last week. So all that, the council ended up making the same decision as the planning commission. It was worded differently.
Yeah.
So, we'll see what the next step is, probably figuring out where else we want to do it going forward.
Next.
So pretty big FYI on that.
It is now 6:45 PM. The public hearing is now open. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a sign permit. The subject property is identified in the county assessor's map as. What's that sign permit?
I was like, what? Sorry, historic resource review.
Oh, I thought.
I'm just checking your skills there.
Reading the teleprompter, you know.
We're gonna be longer in.
For the architectural review, the subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 4,800 on map 4N1W3BA. The applicant is John Doctor Incorporated. The owner is Mike Soto. Because quasi-judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and require statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter?
I just would like to say that I'm on the board of directors of the Historical Society. I participated in the research of this house and becoming a city landmark. I don't feel like it affects my decision.
I did some minor looking into the house when it was for sale, but didn't go anywhere beyond that.
I've been in the house with the former owner. Yes. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte communications or site visits? Right. Does anyone in the audience object to the ability of the commissioner to make a fair decision on this? Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close the record, deliberations, and decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to City Code and ORS 197.7975. The following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.36.040 criteria for alteration. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. All right, staff.
Thank you. Okay, so just a little history on this property. So we're here tonight because it's an alteration of a designated landmark. The alterations include alterations to some windows, siding on the house, the front porch, and then the rear porch and decking of those front and back. So just backing up a little bit, this zoning district, the Riverfront District, doesn't allow detached single-family dwellings on the ground level unless you're listed as a designated landmark. And so some years ago, this property's sanitary sewer lateral failed and water was shut off to the property. So that lasted for a couple of years. And in that time, you know, that property lost its non-conforming status as a detached single-family dwelling. In 2019, a previous owner, not today's current owner, initiated listing this property as a designated landmark in order to repair the sewer and reestablish its use as a dwelling again. And then it was officially added to the locally designated landmarks list in 2020, by council with an ordinance. Since then, a permit to repair the sewer still hasn't been submitted. And also it's not been reestablished as a dwelling. So what we're looking at today is not currently a legal dwelling because of that sewer issue. It's still a designated landmark though. And using it as a single family or detached single family dwelling is an option once that sewer repair is made because it's a landmark. That's just a little bit of history there. So because it was listed as a landmark in 2019, we had a really good write-up from the museum and had some photos of the structure from different angles. I hadn't planned on really looking at those. Hopefully you looked at them. Maybe we can reference them if needed throughout the presentation, but they're included in the report. I also have a description from the 1984 Downtown Historic District nomination that just talks about how few alterations had been done previously to the building, so you can hopefully read that in your staff report on page 1. So back in February, 3 months ago now, there was some noted unpermitted exterior work that the building official had caught. You know, he's going over to John Gum School very regularly for inspections, and he looked up and saw that there was work being done on this house. And he posted a stop work order on the site because there were no permits pulled for that work. At the same time, the planning department mailed the owner a letter just stating that there was a historic resource review needed. The contractor responded very quickly shortly after that with an application. The application was missing some materials. So we provided a letter saying, you know, we need some elevations, and then they responded with the series of photos that you see in the report today. So that's why going through the work, it's a little bit confusing because some work is proposed, some work has already been completed, and then some work is partially completed. So it's kind of, there's a mixture of things going on. And that makes talking about it a little bit more complicated. And some of the conditions that you might have tonight, you know, might discuss reversions back to how things were. And so I just want to say that up front, we might be flipping between photos a lot because this, it's been a bit messy to get to where we are. So I apologize if it's like a little bit scattered through the presentation. So first I wanted to point out there's a floor plan on page 32, which is what I have up. You may want to reference this just to get your orientation, like the different elevations. But I thought what I would do is just show you each elevation, like a photo of each elevation, then talk about the changes that were proposed or have been done. So I'll start with the front elevation, which is the side as you're walking up the alley from First Street. That's the most visible side. And I actually have my own photo because it's a lot. So there's the front elevation. So on this elevation, they replaced the decking with 1 inch thick pressure treated decking and then painted that gray. So the flooring's been replaced. More notably, they replaced the decorative porch railing. And the staff report talks about this kind of being one of the more detailed architectural features of the house and also very visible. You can actually see it when you're on, you know, further back on First Street looking up the hill. And the applicant talks about how they replaced this like for like. And so I think, you know, my impression of it is that they did a pretty good job, but that's up for discussion if you guys want to talk about that. So that's it for this elevation. On the north elevation, pull it up here. So there were some window replacements. So you can see the former aluminum slider here that was replaced with a vinyl slider, and it's gridded. That's noted in the staff report that it was formerly just this type of slider, and then they added a vinyl with grids. They also removed all the trim. It hasn't been replaced yet. And then the siding here is obviously incomplete. Also on this elevation, there was a mechanical unit that was just replaced like for like, it's a heat pump. A little bit off of the photo here, just further up. The report also talks about these shutters. You know, one of the criteria for approving historic resource review is that you're not duplicating a false historic appearance. So whether or not you want the shutters to be reinstalled is something I was gonna have us talk about in a little bit. So moving to the back. Oh, that's the other window and mechanical unit. Nothing changed on this window here. So here's the back, this is the rear elevation. So the applicant talks about the condition of the rear that they received it in. I guess the siding had already been removed, and so they just replaced it with the siding that you see today. Also in the back, they noted there was a hole that had been cut previously for an AC unit that was right here. And they replaced it with a similar vinyl slider that you saw just on the elevation that we looked at, and it's gridded. And then right here, there was a hole in the past that was patched with siding. So it had plywood on it when they bought it, and they just filled it in with that new siding.
That's 2111.
Yeah. And I'll note that that siding isn't consistent with any of the other facades of the house. So on the back, they noted that the decking was sagging, and so they replaced these posts and re-leveled the roof, which is great, and then replaced the decking. They are proposing a column wrap around these posts, and then they provided a detail of what that column wrap would look like. That's on page 30 of the staff report. That might not be helpful for you to reference. I think it's got a number. The applicant will also give their presentation, but there is a pretty good detail of what that wrapping would look like.
We don't have any numbers. Staff report's really small. They're up.
Yeah,
That's okay.
it's just the nature of their application was.
Yeah, it's in their application.
Okay, so the final elevation with changes is the south elevation. And there's a couple of proposed changes, and then there's yeah. I think it's all just proposed. South. Yeah, so here's the south. So they're proposing a new window kind of in this location for a bathroom. They want a really small, long, narrow window here. And they're proposing that as vinyl. And then this is another one of those aluminum double hung windows that they're saying is inoperable and doesn't match any of the other windows, and they'd like to replace that with a vinyl single hung window. So they will have a single hung window in their proposal, but it will be vinyl. So those are the basics. Obviously, we can discuss the criteria and options the commission has, but I think at this point you guys can open it up for.
Yeah, I have a little bit, so we did receive a letter after the planning commission packets. So those were all sent to you electronically and provided to you a hard copy. And there was some comments from the contractor early on, and then repeated in the correspondence from the owner. And the comments pertain to, we did not know this was a historic landmark. And I just want to note some things that we observed from staff. I don't know if that's the best excuse. If we look at the deed, and the deed is part of the record, it's towards the end of the packet, and that deed has a statement that we see on pretty much every deed. This instrument does not allow the use of the property described in this instrument in violation of applicable land use laws and regulations. Before signing or accepting this instrument, the person acquiring title to the property should check with the appropriate city or county planning department to verify that the unit of land being transferred is a lawfully established lot or parcel as defined in ORS, to verify the approved uses of the lot or parcel and some other stuff. So there's this due diligence that's incorporated into the deed itself. And when this property was on the market, Jenny and I answered so many questions from a variety of people. It was one that we made a career of answering questions for a while. And so I don't know if that statement should be given that much weight from a legal standpoint, since that's in the deed. And frankly, it's kind of weird. The seller sat in this room for those hearings. And the seller's listed. This is the person who's granting the property. And so I don't know why it didn't come up as part of the transaction just between people. And also some of the work that was done required a building permit. And if hey, I'm doing this work, it requires a permit, that would have been an opportunity for us to flag, oh, by the way, this is a historic landmark, there's some stuff. So just the story of how we got here is kind of weird, and I thought we should mention that on the beginning of this report. That's all I have to add.
So, as we're understanding, this list of work that's been done and proposed to be done is all up to us in our decision of, well, it's not just proposed stuff, but also could include listings that already been done. Is that correct?
That's right.
Thank you, staff. There's the applicant here and want to make a presentation. You're welcome to come up to the podium. The name, you don't have to say your.
So my name's John Doctor. My company's GCL Construction. Pretty new to this format, so bear with me, I'll get through it. So touching on what Mr. Gratian, if I'm saying that correctly, said we did not know it was historically protected, and I'm told it's in the city ordinance. We didn't look in the city ordinance to see, nor did we, I guess we figured that would have been a disclosure from the seller, not making excuses. Once we found out, we're going through the proper channels to see what we can do there. What else did he touch on? Anyway, how we got here. Mike Soto, who's here, brought me out. We looked at the house with the agent. Looked at it. I previewed it for him, didn't do a home inspection, but did a preview. And he purchased the home, fell in love with the home, wanted to fix it up. So and the one thing the agent did say is everybody loves the railing in the front. Make sure you do it right. So I went to Destero Lumber. I don't know if you're familiar with Destero, but they got all the expensive wood, bought the correct wood, milled it to the 2 3/4 inch square size that was there, rebuilt that. So that's as far as I knew about what everybody wanted to keep there. The back half, and I put it as an addition on the floor pan there. If you go from the living room and bedroom to the bottom of the page where it says kitchen, all of that was an addition at some point. I have no idea when. It could have been the 20s, could have been the teens. So everything in that back half is different than the front half. The trim, the windows, the flooring, and the way it was constructed. There's no studs in the wall. That portion of the house, it was a board and back and type construction, and then was covered with siding. So I don't know what was in there originally. Perhaps there's some photos that can show that. When we got there, it had that aluminum window you'd see on the ground in that one picture. And we took it out and put in the windows with the grids, thinking it looked good. And that's the reason those got there. The other two windows we are proposing, I'm probably bouncing around here, but the other two we are proposing are in the lower bathroom. We'd like to put a window above the tub there to let some light. It's very dark in there. And then replacement of that window that Jenny brought up. And that window right now, I did bring some other pictures of that, made 8 copies. If I can hand them out, or is it too late to hand them out? Okay, it's a better picture of that window. And the window that you see on the outside is actually, just everybody get one? Yeah. All right, and I've got one for you, sir. So the window itself is a wood window. Single hung. It's missing, my hand up, 00.
All right.
It's missing the bottom sash. It's not one of the weighted windows like the front of the house, which were all, I rebuilt all of those. We got an extra. Here, I got one for you too. Okay, cool, thank you. So the bottom half is gone. It's not a kind that has the sash cords and the weights in it. It's different than the front of the house, which has the sash cords and weights. All of those were restored. And then the outside you see is actually a storm window. All the aluminum left on the house are storm windows. So what we're proposing on that window is to shorten it up. I put the size somewhere here. To shorten it up and narrow it up, you can see a 2x4 stud wall through there. That's dividing the bedroom, hopefully dividing the bedroom where that was there and turning it into a laundry room, bathroom. But to do it, we either move the wall and leave that current window, or we put a different window. So those are the proposals, the work. What else work did I do? I did put the T111 on the outside of that. I have pictures. When the house was purchased, that was all covered with black visqueen. We pulled it off and there was a board and batten with the holes in it that Jenny discussed. One was an air conditioner and one was a previous window, I believe. And so we put something on there. It's T111 now. There is room to add another layer of siding over the top of that. If that's what's decided here today. And as far as trimming the windows out, my intention is to match what's there. Do the false sills on the outside with the trim around it. We didn't do that on the back window. I wasn't there when I guys trimmed that out, but that's the intention there. And jumping back to whether we knew or didn't know about the whether it being a historic, as probably everybody knows here, when you buy a house, you pay for title insurance. And what they do is they go check all this stuff, which I agree about the writing here. You do your due diligence, but I, for one, I bought a lot of houses. I've never actually read the fine print, but there you go. Now I know what it says there. The buyers are real excited to be in the town. You know, they want to fix it up and make it a nice place. It was in pretty horrific disrepair over the years, and I've heard stories from inspectors and whatnot, what they know and don't know and what they saw go on there. Well, we're doing a real good job cleaning it up inside and out underneath. I'm hoping we can do a couple changes and get what the homeowner wants and still have the city be happy with what we're doing. So I'm open for any questions you guys might have.
You planning on putting tongue and groove on top of the decking, the plywood?
The plywood was there. I replaced like for like. So I did, the one thing I made different is I made it pressure treated. We haven't painted it yet. They were both painted gray. My plan was to paint it the same gray. And prime and paint the railing, which we obviously haven't done yet. One other thing we're asking for is to replace the gutters. Somebody did a horrible job. They put little blocks and this house originally had no gutters. And so the tails don't accommodate gutters very well. What I would need to do is around the perimeter of the house on the fascia board is add a 2x4 trim board. I use prime spruce for my exterior trim, and that would let us attach a gutter to it. You can see the gutter in that picture was actually, it is in that picture laying on the power wire that's coming to the service wire coming to the house. It just, the way they did it, it's not gonna last. It didn't last, which was kind of the theme of the repairs that have been done to date on the home.
John, would you need to add a fascia board on all elevations, or is it just this elevation and,
You see the upper gutters, some of it's guttered, some of it isn't. And the original house, instead of having gutters, they have a little crown molding that went around there. There's a couple pieces left, no full pieces left. One of the pictures, you can see it real clear. It was from a rear elevation. And my proposal is to, everywhere there's a fascia board, move it out. Basically, I'm adding fascia board to move the gutter out because if I put gutters on there, the roof hangs over the gutter. Up on the very top, you see there's a gap in the upper crown molding, I'll call it, fascia board. Somebody had pulled that out, so I think those might be the only 2 crowns left on the house. I'd have to double check, but that's my proposal there. We would get rid of the crown to be able to do that because the crown's at an angle and we can't mount a gutter to that. And the post, going back to that, it's a pretty simple wrap we're proposing, and that is to wrap the 4 sides and putting somewhere I had a picture, but just wrap the top with trim and the bottom with trim, not a bunch of ornate detail. Other than somebody at some point had put little scroll things from Home Depot. It still has the tags on the back of them. And they look kind of, yeah, right there. So those were all retained, and I want to put those back up. It's got a little bit of gingerbread that looks nice on them, but I don't have to. I think that covers the exterior changes that were proposed to be done.
We haven't discussed many decisions, but is the owner and you willing to make changes to meet architectural codes and bring it up to snuff as far as architectural standards? Or you really want to do what you've done and hoping that we'll approve that? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, do we have our feet dug in the sand and are non-agreeable?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Not that it makes a difference in our decision, but
yeah.
it makes a difference on yours.
No. The owners plan on being part of the community, and that doesn't do, and nobody wants to not get along, and we're in the middle of construction now. Now's the time to make the changes. Grids on the windows, although we think they look cool, maybe they're not cool, so maybe that's the one thing we'll have to go reverse on, but if the decision is you guys don't like grids either, so.
Any questions of the applicant? Thanks. So
Well, we work on the ratings. That's good.
Worked out good, yeah, thank you,
Yeah, that really turned out nicely.
thank you.
are you representing the applicant or do you want to come up and talk to him?
Sure, yeah, we'll come with you.
You have to be separate. Why not?
I'll get
Stay if you want. That's important.
Okay.
My name is Michael Soto. My name is Michael Soto. It's Gail Ritt, my other half. And we were very excited when we saw the house. We have a lot of love and passion for an older home. And And so we noticed that it was deteriorating. It's been on the market for a while. And we thought, the beautiful city of St. Helens, why can't we be part of this community and rehab this home? And honestly, not knowing it being in a historic or registered as historic home is not an excuse. Because when I purchased the home, when I was buying it, I personally asked the seller's realtor, person to person, if this was any restriction or listed into any special any history or anything like that. We gotta be, oh, no, it's, it's just need a little bit of love and fix right here, everything's fine. And so honestly, it was a tough decision for me. We were thinking, I don't know if I should even go through here. It looks like it's a lot of work. I'm not sure. But again, walking around downtown here, it's just gorgeous. It's beautiful. So we said, you know what? Let's fix it up. Let's give it a try. And when we looked in there, there was actually people still living in it. I was amazed because we talked about the sewer system, the sewer. And I'll get to that in a second. And so I was wondering, how are these people living in this home that is partially torn apart? The inside was probably worse. I don't know if any of you have been in there.
Dave's been in there.
I've been in there.
You have, okay.
Jennifer, looks like you've been in there.
Real estate broker, so.
Yeah, oh, good. It was an
I
experience.
mean, just looking at your face, not to interrupt, but everyone's
That's okay.
nodding along.
Yeah,
It's actually
it was a little scary in there. So, and that really made me even think if we should really go through this whole thing, what are we dealing with here? So our main purpose really is to rehab the house as close as possible to the original one. And honestly, it was our mistake putting that window in there without really, I do read due diligence. That's it. Maybe John doesn't, but I do. But normally I would, when I purchase something, all that is in the disclosure. When title or yeah, sure. And so we went with it and really not really even thinking about the window was leaking, was crooked. There's a big hole, it's leaking. It's not safe. The front porch was not safe. They told us not to walk in there. The back porch was not safe. It was all rotten. The cover was gonna come down to someone before anyone get hurt. I'm not here to rehab the house and then flip it. We're not flippers. Our intention is to live there with our family. We live in Hillsborough right now. We have an older home there as well that was built in 1885. And what we do for work, we have a couple of business. I own a restaurant there, tap room as well, and we're artists and musicians. We're a big part of the community in Hillsborough. So I was aware about the sewer issue. We were told by many that it was collapsed. It was collapsed on the street. That's it. That's the end of that. There's nothing we can do about it. So we went further before I purchased the home that we hired a professional sewer inspector that actually fed a camera in there all the way down to the bottom, see what we can find, if it's really collapsed or what was going on. And we found that someone accidentally or purposely dropped a test cap into the sewer line. And we have the video and the picture that the test cap is plugging our end of the sewer line. But unfortunately, that part of the line is in my neighbor's property, which I spoke with him if we could go in there and repair it. Because when we flush it with water, the water was going through, but when you drop some solids in there and stuff, of course it'll be backed up, right? But, there was a soup, the test cap was in there blocking it. And when I spoke to my neighbor, he would not allow me to fix this little part to get that sewer going again.
That's why you didn't pull the permits yet, because
That's correct. And so we are going to pursue, and I'm gonna probably ask you guys' help how we can move forward with this the sewer line. Someone mentioned, there was a email back and forth from the city that I can connect into the alleyway, and then later on, someone said there's a gas line there that you can't connect there. So I'm still talking to my neighbor. He's a bit on the stubborn, grumpy side, so he's just like, well, I don't want that in my easement. I don't want anyone. But the truth of the matter is that sewer line was already connected there long before. And I do not understand why he was not allowing us to just remove the test cap and put a new line, and things would be done. It'd be back to norm. So I hit the dead end there. But I wanted to, again, apply or ask for help how I can continue on to get a sewer line connected. We have good intention with this home in the city. We're not drug dealers, we're not crackheads, we're good citizens. We are very much part of our community in downtown Hillsborough. And we've been there, I've been there for 40+ years. And Gail here is also been a huge part. She actually worked for the city of Hillsborough for half a dozen years, and
I never would have even thought to call the planner. I even have planner friends.
yes.
It's never crossed.
So anyway, also I just wanted to thank you guys, everybody, for having this hearing, and hopefully we can move forward whatever we need to do to make things better and to make things work. So right now everything's on hold. So hopefully we can move into our cute little house there soon and enjoy a cup of tea in the back porch and be part of the community. But anyway, go ahead, Gail. Thank you. Any questions for me, by the way?
We're pretty proud of our historic homes and structures down here, and people like to come to see them. So
Sure.
we appreciate it if we get picked up and restored, and
Yeah,
it's part of our community pride.
I love it. Looking at my neighbors in the back there. I just admire them. Wow. Great here. Great. Anyhow,
I just wanted to say thank you for putting so much time and energy and effort into this project of this home. It's one home in this hill in this town, and it really was impressive to read the document that got put together and all the questions and the thoughts, and that someone is watching the home, and so thank you for the pictures, because I consider myself a pretty astute researcher, and the only thing that I could ever find was the nomination in 1984 that mentioned all the homes. And I never, ever found anything that say that it was ever officially registered until I saw today the document that said in 2020, the council actually was who created the fact that this structure is actually historic. And I was curious, just in all the years that it was in such disrepair, was there ever any conflict in all those years? Because they weren't doing anything to it? Is that why there was never any attention when all the other boarding got put up, or the fence was falling down, or
The show place, it was gorgeous.
the whole entire, like, the Twilight movie? There had to be a reason why they wanted to use this beautiful structure. But I just really wanted to thank Mike and John for their hard work and their vision, and I'm sort of just someone that gets to come along and enjoy these beautiful projects and appreciate and be kind of a part of what's happening, so yeah, we're just excited about the community, and we're excited about all the things that are happening here, and I'm excited to see what John and Mike do to that house, because like, you know, you look at something like this and you have vision. David said he actually even looked at the house. It's a special,
Incredible property.
it's a special home here. The little alleyway and just how cute all those things are. So we're just hoping that we can continue with the sewage, and, you know, I know that everybody here really has the intention of creating a beautiful place. That can be a show place for the community and a special place that people can.
You know, the Twilight fans will be stopping there and looking at it. Because anything filmed in the Twilight will be.
You'll know them by their
They'll-
starry-eyed look.
I remember watching the filming through that alley there.
Yeah.
So,
It is very surreal watching the films and being like, that's where I walk my dog.
Yeah, we just met someone today that's actually filming down here.
Oh, yeah.
Record
So-
stores.
Yeah.
Say much, but
so, to me, you know, seeing it in a few years when they keep knocking your door. We'll see inside your house.
yeah.
Nice
Yeah.
to think about it.
Unless that's something you could be, so.
Also, I was just curious because when we looked at the house, obviously the sewer was not connected or was not functioning already. But people are living in there and there was water, the water was turned on. Why was it? We don't have any intention to use this bathroom or the sewer without a proper sewer line. But perhaps for emergency purpose that the water should be on, if there's any fire or landscaping purpose, we would like to cut all those weeds down and start planting some flowers to make it even look beautiful in there. Maybe for watering. I don't know why the water was all of a sudden was shut off, but it was on when the people was there. So,
The water can't be turned on by the building official. The utility building has been notified that water cannot be served to that property because there's no sewer. The building official
so why was it on before?
it was shut off.
So they had water.
I mean, we could check our utility billing, but from what I understand, water was off.
They had water, cause I turned the faucet on in the house, they had water, I checked them
We
on.
used it to do the sewer scope.
Yeah, that's how we flushed the sewer line, the water was on, so I don't know why all of a sudden,
They were squatters.
I believe the water was on when I checked it out as well.
yeah, so,
Yeah, I don't know how they got it on.
They locked it.
right.
One thing that mystifies me a little bit is the way I understand the law, and I'm rehabilitating a 1908 house now, and I did the building across the street. Other historic houses. Is I had to do an environmental study on my house so I could dump any of the debris. Did you guys do any kind of environmental look at that house, like the asbestos siding that's on it currently? You leaving the asbestos siding on, likely asbestos siding on?
It's asbestos. I can tell by looking at it, my experience in historic homes, but we didn't dispose of any of the siding.
Yeah,
Everything's retained.
Like for me to get a dumpster, I had to provide waste
Yeah.
management with my,
Yeah,
you have to.
I use a tent company as well to,
Yeah, the back porch siding was already replaced by the time we got there. It was batten board that was on there. But anyhow, I just thought that was kind of weird that the water was on before and then all of a sudden it's off now. So I'm requesting that maybe you guys can help us out and that water back on. Our purpose is not to use, there's no sewer line, that's not it. If there's any issues with fire or maybe perhaps watering, it's nice to have a little bit of water that can maybe make a huge difference in there. You know, when you're doing.
And everything's gonna die.
Yeah, all the plants are already dead. It's like a jungle now over there. So we'd like to start planting some stuff on there. I don't know who made the decision to shut our water off, but I don't think it's right. That's just my opinion on that.
Questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some opposition, or you may come back with your vote. Anyone else have testimony in support of the application? Anybody have neutral testimony, not in favor, not against?
I'd love to see it rehabilitated. I've been living above it since,
State your name for the.
Go up, go here,
Vance Gardner,
up here.
75 South Second.
Sorry, the microphone won't get you really well unless you're.
Okay, it probably won't hear me back there.
There you go.
No, I'd just love to see, there's a mic, I'd love to see the place rehabilitated. It's, I mean, I've been in since 2001, I've been up there and watched. I mean, you guys all know the storied history of the place. And if someone's willing to come in and love it, I'd love to see that happen. I'm tired of mowing all those lawns by myself. In fact, I was thinking about suing the city and taking over the lawns that I've been taking care of over there in Anya's Dreams since '04. So anyway, there you go. I'd love to see it happen.
With your support.
Well, I'm beautiful.
Okay.
I'm gonna park in my driveway.
Does anyone have testimony in opposition?
Brady Preham. So I too want to see the building rehabilitated. But I'm not buying that we didn't know it was historic. I think that it would be really hard, especially if you're in business, to not know that that was a historic building and not even get a permit. If you're a construction worker, it's like that doesn't fly with me. I think that's. And personally, I think that you should deny any modification to the house until the number one issue. I actually looked at buying the house myself way back when Rocky owned it. And you know, the sewer was the issue. And still is the issue. And to me, it's like they should not be allowed to do anything to the house until they've addressed that issue. And that to me is the first thing that should happen. And so if it was, I was sitting in the planning commission, I would say, no, you may not continue anything in the house until you resolve your sewer issue. Once there's no point in moving forward with this building without you have a house that can be habitable and it's sewer. And so that would be my recommendation. Yeah, figure out whether you work it out with your neighbor, put in a new line, which is what I actually investigated. The new water line is gonna be. You have to do it, it's like $80,000 plus. So when I got estimates on that, it's like, yeah, and that's even if you can get it done. So to me, that's the first issue. And then you can go forward and talk about these other things. But I do want to see the house. It's a beautiful home, have a great view. I've been in it multiple times. And hope to see it remodeled and restored, but again, fix the sewer first.
Just to clarify, this is not a planning commission decision, this is a historic resource. We're the historic resource committee, in addition to being planning commission.
Right, yeah.
Would the applicant like to rebut anything? Is there any more opposition? Online?
Anyone on Zoom?
Would you like to rebut any statements that were?
Please. John Doctor here again, so I want to touch on that permitting. I've been doing restoring old homes since 1996. Never once have I been found in violation of working without a permit. I still disagree. I need a permit for what I did, for what I talked to Mike about, and we argued, right? You know, we argued about it. Mike hit me with the 105.1 code stating basically it envelops every kind of repair. Technically, if you replace a toilet seat under this code, you need a permit. That being said, I got the proper permits and I will be getting the proper inspections. So that's where I'm at with the permitting.
We're not dealing with all the permitting, just the outside historic review.
Yeah. Diane?
Yeah,
You have
I'm in support of the house being rehabilitated, as David mentioned. he and I both looked at it, and honestly, we're scared off by the sewer issue. So good for you for doing, because I talked to Amber, who owns the Twilight House. They had also looked at it twice and had the sewer scoped and thought it was in worse shape than it is. So I'm really pleased to hear that it's in better shape than that. I think my only concern is that we have a historic district. We already have new builds going in that clearly don't conform very well to the historic standards. And so I would hope that, vinyl windows are fine, but use double hungs if you're gonna replace them, if that's what was there originally. There are options to both put in updated materials and yet still maintain the actual historic look and feel of the exterior of the house. And that would be the only thing that I would say you might want to press more on, just because every time we change something, like if they get rid of the crown molding that's there, if they don't save it, no one can ever go back and put that crown molding back, because we won't know what it looks like. At the minimum, the Historic Society should take photos of it. So if someone actually wanted to fully restore the home's exterior, they could. I understand that there are permitting issues and that there are compliance issues. Obviously, David and I run into that rebuilding our house, where there's stuff that has to be brought up to code, but we are trying as hard as we can to keep the house like it was, and even put back walls that have been taken out and stuff to give more of the craftsman character back to the house that we own. And so my only request for all of you as the historic permitting group would be simply that you try to encourage people or require people, depending on how you feel about it, to maintain the actual look and feel, even if they're using modern materials. Because that is possible. It costs more, but it is possible to do.
Thank you. You can rebut this because it was supposed to be before your rebuttal, so
Yes.
anything else to say?
The windows are, as far as slider or single hungs, they're not double hungs, but we took out sliders. We replaced like for like as far as that goes. And the one single hung that we are replacing, our intentions are to replace that with a single hung as well. That's all I got.
Not a lot to say, but I'm gonna do it during deliberation.
All right, good. Report that. All right. Does the commission have any other final questions? The applicant?
Excuse me, can I just say one more thing after this?
Yes.
As someone who lived my entire life in a home where we didn't open the windows, if you've ever had an amazing, beautiful, brand new window, after you've lived with the windows that John restored, the kind that all the old windows, I grew up in those. I lived in many apartments with the strings in the old windows, but there's a lot of focus on the windows here, but I just wanted to have you consider in your decisions is that there's something absolutely incredible about being able to open beautiful new windows and knowing that those windows are safe and they're secure and they're locking and they have wonderful clean screens. And I just wanted to say that because there's so much focus on these windows and what is the best window and materials and modern materials versus restoring and changing. But if it was my choice as a homeowner, I would want beautiful, safe, locking, amazing windows. So whatever materials are consistent, I'm sure Jennifer, we can become more knowledgeable on what is consistent, but that was our priority, was really safety and how easy and efficient they would be in all of our weather here, and that I could have beautiful open windows all the time that I wasn't struggling with.
Thank you. Commissioner, have any final questions of the applicant or the staff? All right. None. The public record is now closed. This matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decision.
So,
Scrolling back out to the list of changes.
I appreciate what is being said about livability of the house. This panel is guided by the Secretary of Interior's guideline. So that's what helped me make my decisions on this. I'd like to tell the panel that as participating in having it become a landmark, just because something's old 50 years or older doesn't mean that it meets the criteria to be a landmark. It has to be something significant. So if somebody significantly lived there or significant architecture. The reason this particular home was put as a city landmark was because significant architecture, because the only example of an Italianate cottage in the city. And so, in my opinion, the changes that have been made totally disregard the style of an Italianate cottage. And I'm deep into what I'm doing on my house is not a restoration, it's a rehabilitation. What they would do there, even if they met the Secretary of Interior's guidelines, is a rehabilitation, not a restoration. I think we need to stick with the precedent that we've set, that I don't even like, that we've allowed fiberglass windows in the past couple hearings because they're paintable, so they would appear to be wood. But nowhere in the Secretary of Interior's guidelines does it allow vinyl. So I struggle with that. T111 also. I can't get behind that. It's in no way appropriate material. So I can appreciate and like the fact that they did a great job on the railing. But I also say like for like make no difference whatsoever. Just because somebody else destroyed it in the 70s from put the windows in doesn't mean that you need to replace it. Well, it was most likely a double hung window. To replace it with a slider or a single hung. Think about what we just did on the Miles house. You know, those windows were a big deal. So I think we need to take that into account. When I did my building across the street, I wasn't on the planning commission at the time. I spent countless hours. That's why I'm part of the Historical Society now. I had to prove that I had those mezzanine windows up there to be able to put them back. And it was a lot of work and it was hard and it was expensive. But I'm thrilled that you guys are in town and that you want to, people know me as like an old house nut. It's my life. And I appreciate the cost and the work you've done already, but it needs to be done right. One small contradiction of that is I also think that we need to take into account, because Twilight was an historical event in town somewhat, that, you know, people that come to town might want to see it resemble what they saw in the movie. So maybe there's some leeway there. But I think that the key thing is we put this as a city landmark because it was an Italianate cottage, and this is making it an Italianate cottage.
I would agree. I too like vinyl windows. I mean, for their convenience and warmth, but I did grow up with wooden double hung windows, and I know that those can work as well. I definitely don't like the grid. I think that's very 80s. I don't like it when I live in. I look very 90s. To me, there was more of I did the attempt to do like for like, but there wasn't really in my mind an attempt to for that historic, what it should have been, not just what it had already been converted from.
So I've got a question about the like for like issue. I know there are people here who have more knowledge of the applicable historical preservation law than I do. So the impression I'm getting, to make sure I've got this correct, is that let's take, windows are something we focused on, but I'll just use it as an example. Let's take the aluminum as an example. The aluminum slider was probably not original to the house in the late 1800s, right? Like that's not
in the 70s probably.
right.
Yeah.
And so the historical standard is not preserving the changes to the historical building. It's preserving the historical building. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the opening is most likely indicative of a double hung window, the size of the opening. I know it because in the house that I'm working on, I had somebody make historically correct wood windows with the weights back in and did the whole thing. And I know that it can be really expensive. So the compromise to me is allowing a fiberglass window that can be painted,
Which we've allowed.
but it has to resemble a double hung window, whether it's single hung. I mean, double hung and single hung, it's like single hung, you could raise the bottom, double hung, you could raise the bottom, lower the top.
Yeah.
That's the difference. The opening is the same. So I'm not stuck on that it has to be a double hung. But I think it should be appropriate for the movie.
Yeah, fiberglass would be a less expensive option than the wood. for sure.
Yeah, I think fiberglass. So as someone who now has wood windows in a historical rebuild, I was surprised by how much they looked like non-wood windows. So I think if you can avoid that, just go with fiberglass, that makes life a lot easier.
Jennifer, just based on what you said, I wanted to ask a clarifying question. So they mentioned that the back half, we'll call it, was an addition. I'm seeing in the old historic photos that there was that same shape of the roof, even in 1909.
I was questioning that too.
Photo.
I was questioning that.
And so I felt like I couldn't come to the conclusion that was an addition. I just wanted to point that out to the commission that was testimony given, and I couldn't find a way to justify what that was said there.
I would agree with that. And I was reviewing the photos. I wish there was better pictures of the porch too, because they did a great job in replacing what was there. I'm not convinced that was necessarily an Italianate
Right.
porch railing, and
We have the photos that we have, and that's kind of the best.
we dug long and hard for those pictures
Yeah.
that we did find.
Right, and most of them were from larger city aerials zoomed in. But the oldest photo we have indicates this roof line there, so.
And just since you're putting up that picture, I think there's not necessary to replace the shutters.
There is something there was, I don't know what the situation is now, but there definitely was something. It seemed like an addition going on in the house, like you could see a gap in the house where clearly there was exterior siding in between like two rooms, so I do. At some point in its long and storied history, something a little hinky happened.
Yeah.
And certainly my feeling was that it was that front. I called it the front, I guess technically it's the back from the top of the hill, that seemed like it had been added on.
Seems like a lot of people were interested in this house over the years.
It's
I mean, it's a very special house.
Chris, you killed it all for everybody else, so you're brave.
Construction technique from what I call the addition and the original house are night and day different. Yeah, underneath the attic, the hip and the hole was added at some other time. It was a square house to start with.
We're gonna pull up this.
That's certainly what it looked like when I started moving sheets of plastic around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can tell that there's an addition.
Excuse me.
What you said two interesting things about the exterior that I find interesting. You said one, that you're interested in its passion to be how it was, what the Italianate cottage should look like. But then you also mentioned that you'd like to see it look how it did in the movie Twilight. So those are
There's a contradiction,
specific
yeah, there's
exterior
a contradiction.
that are very different, because Twilight is how they made it look for the movie, which might be this sort of
Decorated.
impressionistic appearance of what everyone now thinks it should look like. But we really don't have any clear pictures of what that structure that I've seen in all your beautiful research. Really,
The movie set was
Look like,
definitely a movie
you know?
set, and trying to dress it.
I want to see the movie.
And that was a short span. I
Yeah.
mean, it didn't look.
Really informal here, but once the hearing is closed, we can't discuss
This is
with
the time for the planning commission.
the planning commission, because we can't introduce new information.
Okay.
We have to decide on what we have.
He's got a little excited.
Yeah, that's okay. All right, clearly I didn't realize that.
If there were attorneys in the room, they'd be, are you okay?
All right, we'll get to it. Some of us are not the kind of attorney to know that rule.
In case anyone hasn't seen the movie, this is a screen cap from the movie as you're walking up the alley, that Jennifer was referencing.
And really the French doors. Is it historically accurate? I think there's some obligation, if you know that it's an Italianate cottage and the requirement is to keep it remain an Italianate cottage, that you do some research on what it may look like. Maintain the historical openings based on those things. If he's done a bunch of renovations, then I think he could walk right up to a double hung opening and say, yep, this was just like, let me all. But the reason I asked about the porch being plywood is that would never happen. So that's why I was wondering if it was maybe going to be capped off with tongue and groove, like it would be. It would never happen. We haven't allowed T111 in anything.
It looks like we've got, if I'm reading this correctly, we've got a sort of a list of items starting on page 4.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you could help us with that,
yeah. I'm happy to.
help the reds here.
So for the benefit of everybody in the room, we're looking through the criteria for alteration. A, B, and C are all met. You can read through the reasons why. The first question we get to is D, which says the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal or relocation of distinctive materials or alterations of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property shall be avoided. And so staff's comment here is that if the commission feels like an alteration from an aluminum window, clearly not original, to vinyl is inappropriate, that you should create a finding about how that window material characterizes the property. That way it supports your finding. I'm hearing from a couple commissioners that vinyl is inappropriate. Are you guys kind of all in agreement there that the material of the window should not be vinyl?
So I mean, the rub for me is the standard is you can't alter or remove existing features. That feature is already gone. The aluminum isn't historical, so I just want to make sure that we have a rule that says you need to replace with a more historical feature? Or is that something that falls within the purview?
Sure did that on the water.
Okay, so that is just making sure.
Yeah, we had, before you were here, we had them remove the city did the.
All right.
They put in vinyl windows in the Bennett building, which is next door, and they had to remove them.
Yeah, I appreciate that, just making sure I know what the scope we're dealing with is.
House, we required fiberglass. We then put a slide, and I think they were going from,
Something else.
some aluminum to what should be as well. And we required him to stick with the fiberglass.
That. I don't recall that all the features are inside, but if this much work is needed on the outside, the inside must be similar, and you can still see, do the research, see what windows used to be there. You can see where old doorways were. You can see where, it's like a ghost in its history. Yeah, so.
If I could, I need to mention something about how the construction is different.
It's not the time.
It should have been earlier.
I mentioned it earlier, but it's not being picked up.
So also on this point, we should talk about the openings that were altered, because you can, they filled in some openings that probably didn't have windows before, and so you can talk about whether you want those returned to siding or, so particularly on the back. Todd, I'll pull up that.
We have no historical photos of the back that I've seen.
Yeah.
They could or when in pulling off the plywood, there was framing for a window there.
And if there was a hole that an AC unit, which could have been where a window was, I mean, there's no real way for us to No.
So we had photos that this was siding here. This was a hole added for the AC. So that was not an original opening. We had
Here,
sorry, I'm circling that.
Oh, okay.
This was not there prior.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're.
Whether or not it was a different size before, I don't know, but the AC unit hole was new.
I mean, in my experience in doing houses, I've peeled away a little of the asbestos siding to see what is underneath for siding. I mean, it's like,
Well, this was already removed.
but I mean, it's likely to match the side that hasn't been removed. There's still asbestos on all three other sides. It's gonna be a clue as to what was on the back. So. Fortunately, that asbestos siding acts almost like a Ziploc bag and it preserves things underneath beautifully. So. You can't take it off, I've done it, had it done.
So on that air conditioning opening, make sure that I've got the ask here. The ask is to put a window in that space, correct?
Filled it with a vinyl that has grids, similar to the one that's on the other side. So you have two options here. You can say that that was not an original opening and they should return that to siding. Or you can suggest another window material choice since the opening's already been made. You know, that's kind of a discussion.
If the question would be, if there were a window there or even on the window on the other side, matching it, would that be in character with an Italianate cottage?
The long window fit there.
Yeah, would it
That would
still,
look like it was part of it.
like it always was, because we don't know what it was exactly, the same. It's the same.
Yeah, I having zero information about the, right, clearly nothing about that is historic. Having zero information about the backside of the house,
So one thing I
what?
wanted to address, if you were leaning towards allowing this new opening, you know, it is the backside, there's less visibility.
It's so unique though, it's like you see three sides of it.
Yeah, it's kind of not the backside of this house.
Yeah, that's true. It does have streets on multiple sides. But if you were leaning that direction, you know, I talk about that, the commission can make a finding about that if you wanted to allow a change. Just a thought.
I'm open to allowing an opening there, but it needs to be something more historically correct than that opening.
I would agree.
Yeah.
That's reasonable.
we go back to the window material and talk about that.
Yes, let's do it.
I'm confused as to what we're saying and not
Saying
saying.
no vinyl.
Fiberglass.
We are saying it could be fiberglass. I'm doing that, but we have allowed that and some other ones, since that, okay.
I think it could be painted to resemble wood too, yeah.
Are you asking how fiberglass is different in looks to vinyl?
No, unfortunately, I know that difference.
I
You do.
don't do that thing.
Are there other materials you would be open to, just to give the applicant more options?
Wood.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think fiberglass is a big compromise. I
Yes. So is,
wouldn't regret that from,
does
we've already set that precedent.
the fiberglass windows look like
Have a
wood?
texture of wood, they can
Okay.
look like wood, stand up better. They say there's more vinyl windows in the dump than diapers these days.
Fiberglass windows look like wood to me, although
Yeah, they do look like wood.
Yeah, good.
I'm willing to believe people with a more discriminating eye can tell the difference. I do not.
So you talked about single hung and you talked about double hung. I have not heard any okayness with sliders.
I'm absolutely not. I'm absolutely not.
Doesn't fit the character.
I mean, I would think even, I don't know what date this back part of the house was built, but I would be surprised if it was sliding glass era.
Even if it was put in the 20s, it would still been singular double.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been a slider.
Can't figure out.
You want to leave the applicant the ability to do single or double hung?
Sure.
As long as the appearance is the same.
Yeah.
Was part of the
Yeah, I think we covered D. They're also proposing a new vinyl window in the shower area. That was a slider. I think that's not appropriate. It is kind of a, I think that it was a 10 by 30. 10 by 30. I don't know that they're gonna be able to find that design in that shape. So are you saying no to a new opening?
I'm having trouble picturing where the shower area is.
They actually have a good idea of that.
Before you go there,
It's on.
but D is changes to the historic character, not just that window we looked at, right?
Right.
So seems like the deck plywood is the same kind of still exterior, right?
That comes up in AE.
I think they were, yeah, they're
Oh,
just,
no, that's the rear deck. I apologize.
Yeah,
thought it was here.
so it's not addressed here.
Good time.
It's not addressed at all.
Well, let's get through what's on the
Window,
list.
and then we can.
Yeah, we'll make sure we cover it.
Okay.
So this is the elevation where they're proposing the new 10 by 30. You can see it drew it in here.
Well, yeah.
So I mean, that doesn't work
Hmm.
as the proposal, so.
No window there. In my opinion.
They couldn't have had a small little window.
That's all the new construction windows that they throw in showers to get light in the bathroom, which I understand, but it's not appropriate. for this.
Like any window at all, could you do a non-opening window, just glass?
In that shape,
Little
what
rectangle?
are you achieving?
Or
That's
I
historically.
mean, why, well, I don't know,
square.
I'm wondering if there was historical precedent for that.
I
don't.
Good to know
All right,
for me, yeah, I'm not.
It is the less visible side.
That's
Maybe
true,
something that's like square or. That shape of window never would be. In the house. So. I'm only one vote, if everybody else wants it, then it's fixed, then.
It seems like, I'll put it in make, but they wanted to put a small little window in, they just put a small little window in.
There probably wasn't no indoor plumbing.
Yeah,
sure.
well, it wasn't for a bathroom.
Yeah, so.
It's a square.
But acknowledging that, yeah, the house is built, probably didn't have showers at all.
Is this, can we get some clarification on, this is the bathroom we're talking about?
Yeah.
Yes,
It is,
I'm certain of that, yeah, and the floor plan. That would be that too.
so what I could live with is if there was some kind of square window, small square window there, because there is a type of window called a jib window. That it slides into the house, my house had them, or casement window could have been appropriate.
I mean, there's,
I
there must be some sort of historically appropriate window.
You have to be opening.
That's,
Yeah, it doesn't have
there's
to-
gotta be an option.
Light in.
Yeah, my issue is that it's vinyl and then it's a slider and then it's that shape.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
But if it was some kind of square that looks like could have been casement or
Yeah.
big window or something, then let's go with that.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so a window that is of appropriate historical look, acknowledging that it's gonna be fiberglass or
Yeah.
whatever, yeah, okay.
So casement. is okay,
Casement's okay, if they want it to function, do a casement, if they don't care that it opens. In a shower, it's creating a problem, eventually, probably.
Okay, so,
I think that covers items in D. We talked about the shutters in E. It's the commission in agreement that the shutters should not be reinstalled and the existing ones should be removed. That was what commissioner should make. So,
I mean, I think that you shouldn't add, I think that we don't want to add false shutters. I don't see anything here that requires removing them if they're already there.
Well, it's like,
But-
it's like half a shutter.
Right, I was going to say, but the fact is that I think for aesthetics, you probably don't want just a random assortment of shutters.
Saves them some money not having to duplicate shutters.
You could do functional shutters.
Yeah, if you wanted it, it should be, but again, it's one,
Look like you the pictures that.
yeah, but it's hard to tell from them, but.
And I think to me, that's one of the more clear-cut cases because the standards are very specific about not, sort of creating a faux historicity.
How do you guys feel about the column wrapping that's proposed on the rear deck?
We can live with that.
Yeah.
I like that.
I don't know what an Italianate cottage column wrapping.
But likely that would have been the back of the house, so they wouldn't put it all the pretty stuff on the back, so.
But I think it's, again, particularly because we have no idea what the back of the house ever looked like, I think it's perfectly appropriate to make it look good in a way that you enjoy that is not breaking the historical character. And I think that, to my knowledge, that would do.
I agree, and I think it ties in with the front,
Yeah, it does. It's a
detail
nice
of that.
echo of the front details.
Yeah, the detail to match the front, was very fancy.
Yeah, I think the wrap is a nice idea.
I can agree on the front that they would change those.
Oh, no, I would wrap the front. I'm just saying on the back.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
I think we're on to F. F is met. Not that anybody thought of anything new there. 13. This is the one that talks about distinctive materials, features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved. This is where I talk about the front deck railing. It sounds like you're all in agreement that that's great. They can go ahead and paint.
Yeah. Front deck's beautiful.
I don't think we have much evidence that it was anything different, so.
Yeah. And I should specify, I think it's aesthetically, I think it's beautiful and lovely. I admit it's beautiful in terms of I also think it hit the historical rebuild.
If you look at this picture.
Yeah.
Which I'm referencing this, this picture. I'm not close, that's necessarily the railing, but so hard to see that. But I think that's a little nod also to the Twilight movie, because
I think the railing, regardless of whether that railing pattern was present when the house was put up in the 1800s, I think it is.
it's fine, yeah.
Doesn't look modern.
It's acquired
Yeah.
it's become part of the house's historical character.
Yes.
Again,
Non-original maybe.
And the gingerbread on the columns, that,
I think, yeah, I think that's one of the Italianate features, so. I think that on the, not on the front columns, not on the back. I think they tried to mimic something.
Okay, so H is a bit more of a doozy. Just to remind everyone, this is deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than replaced. Where the severity of deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature, the new feature shall match the old in design, color, texture, and where possible, materials. Replacement of missing features shall be substantiated by documentary and physical evidence. I think we've addressed the aluminum windows are not original. So replacing them with aluminum doesn't make sense. They've also talked about how they're not functional. They want something that locks and works. So replacement is our option. We've discussed that fiberglass or wood replacement is appropriate because of environmental considerations, efficiency considerations, functionality.
That should allow for locking and opening and.
Yep.
All that.
All the things that they talked about.
insulation. Got grids, correct.
Yeah, we said no grids, no sliders.
My feeling on the grids would be if you can find historical examples of grids, then sure, but I don't know.
Be
I-
true divided light if it was.
Right, I don't know if you'd find that for
I
that
think it's
period,
appropriate on that, yeah.
yeah.
It seems we've addressed that. I'm not seeing anything that's not addressed in that.
The plywood on the porch and on the deck. If they put that in.
Say that again, sorry.
Plywood decking.
Yeah, so I think that could fit under K. New additions, exterior alterations or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials, features, or spatial relationships. Et cetera, et cetera. So this is where I talk about trim, siding. We can easily add decking. So my first recommended condition is that all trim on windows that have been replaced, added, or proposed to be added shall match the unaltered trim on other elevations. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes.
Second condition is, where the siding has been removed on the north elevation, so this is where that slider was added, where it looked unfinished.
Sure.
That it has to be replaced with like for like siding to match the surrounding siding. I don't know how you wanna word that, because they're not gonna put asbestos back up.
You could buy concrete siding that looks exactly like that has no asbestos in it.
So concrete,
So unfortunately, I mean, it wouldn't be my first thing if I.
You do like hardy board, would that
yeah,
be
what
close
do
enough?
you, what material, or do you wanna leave it up on the applicant to decide?
I mean, do we need to specify that now or just say it should look similar?
I mean,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about,
Like,
the
when they
concrete,
relabel
but
it
it looks
now,
like asbestos, but so.
It looks exactly the same, but.
So maybe taking out for like, maybe it would just be appropriate to say replaced to match the surrounding siding.
Visually similar, matching.
Yeah.
Especially if the asbestos is staying
Would that
on.
asbestos have been original to the
Yeah.
late 1800s bill? Yeah, I was gonna say that wasn't
Guarantee
original.
it's like.
Yeah.
And then what about the rear siding? That they've put T111. You want that to be the same?
The only question about the decking is. Is a good, solid, functional tongue and groove decking the same thickness as the plywood they put on there, or would it interfere with the doors and everything else? I mean, originally it probably was.
I can
but-
only speak for what I've just done on this house. We put actually marine grade plywood down first and then put tongue and groove on top of it.
And you're raising it.
But it's still no problem being underneath the door.
Okay.
But, I don't know, the frustration on it, because I know this is all boatload of money. It'd be so nice if, I mean, I suppose if initially they hadn't started a bunch of work, would be small scopes of work, to have to come up with, I know it's a big ask to come up with this giant amount of money to do this whole thing at once. It'd be nice if somehow it could be like, okay, here's phase one, here's phase two, here's phase.
Pretty tall threshold, so
Yeah. Yeah, I had no trouble with it.
So the decking, are you as concerned about the rear? Or,
Yes.
so so what proposed condition do you have for that?
And I think it's only because of the location of the house and that it's such a prominent site of the house because of it. If nobody saw it, it was in his backyard. I think it'd be more wonderful, but still,
Yeah, is that decking really visible? The surface of the floor?
Yeah.
Alright,
you see
just try to
you see the ends of it.
put myself out there and see it. Yeah, I suppose as you coming on the walk down the hill.
When you're walking by the house and you see the edge of every tongue and groove. Inverting board.
Yeah, just again, I'm mentally trying to remember the way it was.
Does that fall into the K or?
Yeah, I think so. What, I mean, you're just saying that the material replacement isn't compatible with the appearance.
To be placed on top of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any need to rip out the plywood. I think it's just getting something that looks historic on top of that,
Like a
because the
subfloor
plywood wouldn't
almost.
have been.
Like a sub.
Yeah, because they wouldn't,
Thinner.
you wouldn't have had plywood at that moment.
You can go to the. Building supply and buy tongue and groove. Which would all
So something just sort of a decorative overlay, and then the plywood's doing the work.
I don't know how the end of that is on mine. You don't see the end of the plywood. It's tucked under the fascia. I mean,
So I still don't have a solid grasp of the condition around the decking. So I've been listening, but
If I was going to phrase it, I would say, you know, the deck floor material should have the appearance of visually have the appearance of a historically available material.
Final deck.
Yeah, I mean, the final deck, or however you want to phrase it, my not a lumber historian, but my impression is that plywood wouldn't have been available at the time, but yeah, I don't think that means there's a need to remove the plywood. It's just a matter of putting something on top.
as long as the plywood doesn't show.
so tongue and groove would be an appropriate appearance. Okay.
Sure, yeah.
So L is met, the last criteria is just about photographs.
I was gonna ask you about that. Don't they have to provide photographic evidence and? There was testimony to the crown holding be lost. That's a
Oh,
great.
yeah, we
point.
should discuss the crown molding. Not included in this package, but was brought up during testimony was the desire to add new gutters.
I think it's necessary.
That's
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's necessary.
yeah,
Really, it is.
so,
But I think if we historically document.
Yeah, I mean, it
yeah, we
didn't,
don't have good close-up photos of it, but is that a condition so that you can allow the alterations to the gutter? That you just want photos of that building?
Existing model.
yeah, it doesn't look like there's enough left to make salvaging.
Yeah, on the finding our current digital photos and hard copies, we need better.
Yeah, I don't have any close-up photos and I'm not going on the roof, so they should provide those for sure.
Would there be, I mean, I don't understand quite the detail of it either. Would there be some way to have crown molding and gutters?
It sounded like the answer was no. I know we're not allowed to ask more questions, but my impression was that
I
it would
would
be.
say the problem with new evidence presented to you at the hearing is that it was sort of an incomplete part of the proposal. Sort of mentioned, we don't have photos, we don't have even an understanding of how many sides the gutter and this new fascia board, so. I mean, it's hard to make a decision on something when you don't have all the things.
Goes back to like when we were ruling on the Klondike building, we made them come back and.
Right.
The evidence.
In this case, though, I mean, you kind of have some of the pieces, so you maybe can condition it enough that you feel comfortable.
Is there gutter types that look more historic? That you want to track from the historic?
You do wood gutters, but nobody goes to
Mm,
that
good.
extent. Crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So-
I mean, that's shape wise.
Yeah, I think the shape mimics crown, so I think gutters are really necessary here in
Oh, yeah.
Oregon, and I think we should allow them to do the gutters, but provide. Really detailed photographic evidence of that crown mold that they're taking on.
Or would the,
You throw a piece in the attic.
I was gonna ask if the historical society would just want a piece of the crown molding if it's getting thrown out.
We don't
I guess the answer is
We don't
no.
have the luxury of that kind of space.
And if you're hungry for questions, you could reopen.
The way you're hearing.
Yeah.
Yes,
I do agree with- But I'm okay with it because it's the necessary evils of protecting the house.
They would like to respond. Do we need the response?
It's on the gutter too. I don't know, everybody else feels, okay with this, as long as they give us detailed evidence of.
Yeah, I think as long as we've got a record so that if at some point someone in the future is like, man, I want to restore that historic crown molding. Betters be damned, then they'll know what to do.
No, I agree. Good gutters are necessary and sometimes can give it that finished look that maybe is seen.
They kind of mimic that K shape of the gutter, kind of mimics crown a little bit, so. I think it's-
All right, know how.
Yeah.
Have a motion for this.
So we went through the findings. I think I have enough to create findings based on what you guys talked about. I've taken a stab at altering the conditions. So number one, we didn't talk about, but no damaging physical or chemical treatments are used, such as the boilerplate condition that we have for projects. So for number two, siding that has been removed from the north elevation shall be replaced like for like siding to match the surrounding siding. We're gonna get rid of like for like.
Yeah.
And say replaced with.
Matching look.
Yeah, visually
Similar.
visually similar.
Is what you said.
Yeah.
So visually similar, and then we're also adding the west rear elevation to that statement, so the back and replacement siding. That's number two. Number three, this was one that you accepted. All trim on the windows that have been replaced, added, or are proposed to be added shall match the unaltered trim on the east front elevation. That was just the elevation I chose because it's number four, you decided, do not, reinstall shutters and remove the existing shutters. That was a condition we talked about,
The fake shutters, yeah.
the fake shutters. And then nothing about the column wrapping, we're just approving that as presented, so I'm removing that. Number five, we covered that in another one. So we can get rid of number five. That was just the siding. And then the last one, so this is about the windows. We're just basically rewriting number six to just be all about the windows. So we said, fiberglass or wood windows for all that have been replaced and all that are proposed to be added.
Excuse me.
And then they have to be single hung or double hung. And the window in the bathroom, we talked about it being square.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, historically appropriate size and shape, which I think would be square.
Or basement.
Okay.
And then we'll add a condition 7 about detailed photos of the crown molding before removal or for gutters.
Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
So do we, I don't know, do we vote on storage research stuff or just for recommendations like this?
This is your decision as a board member.
I thought, so.
Commissioner Shoemaker is in a hurry to get out of here. I apologize. We did talk about the decking too, so I'll add the decking for the rear decking.
So I'm just, I forgot how, what would.
So you said so moved, right?
Let's do it.
As discussed.
Yeah.
Let's go, okay.
I know that's discussed.
Seconded.
Okay, how do you vote?
Aye.
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 I think we should, have a more, in the future, have a more detailed discussion about, these variances that we have. And have more of a consistent approach to it.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. There's one thing to read here. The final written decision of the plan of the Resources Landmarks Commission may be appealed, is that right? To the city, because that what the script says, but anyway. The appeal to the city council, the notice of decision will be mailed to all persons who testified or submitted comments, and the appeal deadline will be included in the notice.
And authorization for signature?
The motion. Second. Go.
Aye.
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 Okay.
So that last part. That just means that instead of waiting to the next meeting to sign it, draft it when they sign it, just helps maybe. That's what the application of saying.
And does that mean if there's any appeals that way, that goes then to the city and then we get the letter that says. So these kind of decisions, this is like the decision, or do we get to come back with saying like. Do we get to say, but here is why we would like this, or this is why this is important to us, or anything like that, or these kind of decisions is just like, this is what it is and this is how it is.
Yeah, you do have appeal rights.
Okay.
Yes. And the appeal. The appellate authority or the body that you would appeal to will be the city council. So if you get the decision and you're like, hey, wait a minute, this is not right. And when we read it, this is why we don't think it's right. Then we want to get it out to the council and see.
Thank you for all of your research, especially. Thank you. There's a lot of work that goes into why this is important, and we want you all to know that we very much appreciate the time and the energy that you've all spent on this project.
Well, we appreciate your thoughtfulness and intentionality about the house as someone who's in the process of trying to resurrect a historic home in St. Helens. It is not always easy and definitely not always a painless process, but
Sometimes I think, what did I get into?
yeah. Well, the good news is that despite the housing surprises, you got into a pretty great community and we're happy you're here.
Most exciting part.
Yeah.
And we know that this experience is not like Disneyland.
Intimidating, frustrating.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So we appreciate it. That, is that.
That's it.
Are we done?
Yeah, that's it for that. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And thank you for doing that sewer investigation. That was eye-opening.
So I'm gonna.
Diligence.
Yeah.
The key word,
Weird.
key two words.
Weird that someone would drop a gas cap.
It's weird. It's, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
That's the. My daughter worked for him, sorry.
I understand where you.
All right.
Let's get to the meeting.
Planning Department semi-annual report to the city council.
Yeah, so we, whenever we give the semi-annual report to the council, we like to do the same to you, just to keep you informed of stuff. Because it's just kind of a longer night, we'll probably rush through some things. But with the council, you know, the city reporter is, you know, we gotta stay on time. But, you know, if you have questions, you can certainly stop and talk about it. So we're just gonna, run through this.
Excuse me.
Yeah, oh, I was just gonna say this is instead of 6 months, it's also 4 months, so it should be a little bit faster anyway.
Yeah, because the schedule got messed around, but we're back on track. So we have a couple categories, the project management and then current planning, permit stuff. And Jenny is gonna start with some project management stuff.
So hopefully you're signed up for our waterfront newsletters, but we are mobilizing Friday. They're gonna bring in equipment on Saturday. Yeah, so we'll have construction fencing. The park is officially gonna be closed on the 20th. That's next Monday. And closed through construction. So there's still access to the waterfront walking path. But you just go down the end of Strand and access it to the water there. You don't go through the park, which is how you access it today. So yeah, we're really, really excited to start.
So it'll be done on the 19th next year. 1 year.
The contractor is like, we wanna get it done by December.
Yeah, well, good.
Like, they wanna move so fast. They think this is like.
Exciting timeline.
the biggest project ever, and that they're like, but we'll see. There's always.
The original schedule, right? That was the original schedule, remember?
Yeah, but.
November or something.
Their contract allows them to be, or states that they need to be finished by April 17th.
Oh.
Next year. Yeah. Community Paths Program, we finally received our grant contract. We met with Scappoose and Columbia County. This is the trail between Scappoose and St. Helens that we received a grant for a 30% design. We are hoping to get documents back from the Scappoose, cities Scappoose and Columbia County to get them before council in May. So we're sharing the cost burden of the match, and so we need some documents with both jurisdictions to make all that work. So that's moving forward. We're excited about that. Sealed.
Terminal end of that.
We don't have it yet. Yeah, it'll be decided through the project. I hope it can connect to McCormick Park. That would be my goal, but see, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be really neat.
CLG project, man, we are nearing our deadline.
We are, it's moving.
David, we need to submit for reimbursement very soon. So
I've got a walkthrough on Thursday. The wood windows are in. So we are, and the contractor says they are on schedule to have it done.
you notice
Why?
none of the front porch is done yet.
No, it's not. I'm gonna have some questions when we do this walkthrough.
Grant award.
Yeah,
so-
I've got some questions for them, but they assure me it's gonna be done, and I have informed them that it needs to be done.
Yeah,
So we're gonna keep having that conversation in 2 days.
it sounds like there's no time frame extension either for the CLG money, so if it doesn't happen, we return the money.
Yep.
The Veterans Memorial Grant is in. I actually just got a really great photo. This was from January, but all 7 flags are also in. So behind those new pedestals for each branch of service, there's 7 corresponding flags. It looks really stunning. And then I also have this really cool photo at night that someone took. Yeah, it's
Very cool, yeah.
awesome. So this was a grant funded project through the state as well. The EOA, we kicked off our project. In fact, we just had another project management team meeting today. We finalized our technical advisory committee with this group, so there's 1 commissioner on it. The first of those TAC meetings is in July, but more soon, we have a joint planning commission city council meeting to kick this project off with you guys. So hopefully you can make that in June. Do you know the date, June?
It is the Tuesday or Wednesday in between council days.
June 12th. So you'll learn about this project and get some really good demographic data and the results of our buildable lands inventory for employment lands. So hopefully that will interest you, and if not, you have to sit through it for an hour. Special Public Works loan, this is the loan that I'm assisting with managing for all of the streets and utilities project. That project is moving forward. You've obviously seen there's another contractor working at First and St. Helens Street doing the undergrounding work. The CDBG grant, this is $2.5 million for sanitary sewer capacity improvements at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I get to have a meeting for that. So yay, that project is moving forward. Safe Roads to School grant, this was something we helped engineering with. Obviously the project is done, the sidewalks are opened between Gable Road and Sykes Road, so connecting the high school sidewalks on Gable all the way to the elementary school sidewalks at McBride. There's also a new bike lane along that stretch too. I haven't heard any updates for the TSP update. This is another grant funded project. We're waiting on contracts from ODOT. Surprise, surprise. It'll probably be another 2 months, 4 months, who knows. Urban Renewal Agency support, I always include a slide on that. We have a meeting Thursday. I have another late meeting this week for the May Renewal Budget Committee. They will hopefully recommend adoption to the Urban Renewal Agency, which will meet in June for our next budget. And there's a typo here. It's fiscal year 24-25 budget. Yeah.
Okay, so planning commission, you should be familiar with that. We have 2 positions filled and no interviews for the next 6 months. It's pretty exciting. We've had a lot of interviews over the last few years. So on your proactive items, vacant storefronts was added. Last month is not part of the reporting period, so that's why we're not talking about the plaza here. Let's see. We had some address fixes with the assessor. We always like to talk about that mundane stuff, just to tell people about some of the miscellaneous things we do. You see rare up there. Jenny was a rare. And this year, the city is working jointly with the county, and DEQ is involved to get a person to help us with our TMDL stuff. The county also has to do with that, has to do with runoff pollution, mercury in the waters and stuff like that. And I just found out today that we have been selected as a community, so that progress goes good. Basically, it gives us an intern for an inexpensive price for 10 or 11 months. So that's looking good.
I mean, your fellow rare Lake Helms says hi.
Oh, yeah, is he, he's at DS?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. He's in GIS, right?
No, he's,
He was GIS, for the port when he was my rare cohort.
he's kind of he's a project management expert, basically.
Cool.
Like the
That's awesome.
property owners, property,
So he works in Salem.
well, it actually works from Eugene, probably.
Oh, okay.
So population, some new things. St. Helens finally hit the 15,000 population mark. And our recent growth, so we had all this building going on and our growth rate was just paltry and like, this doesn't make sense. Finally, we had a growth rate that is reflective of that of 3.5%. And interestingly though, because a lot of people looking at the building and they're just, what's with all this growth? I more importantly get away from this, all those kind of sentiments. And the population projection is actually lower than when PSU tracked it back in 2020. You can see the difference there. So the growth is intended to be slower. And interestingly, Scappoose growth is anticipated to be greater in the region. So they're the ones who are gonna dealing with the growing pains. The code amendments, you know this stuff. We don't need to talk about it. PGE parcel, where is PGE parcel gonna be? This is something that we've dealt with quite a bit. I'm here at various maps, looking at sizes, locations. And these were actually related to the solar outfit, which we know wasn't gonna happen, but notice the big red triangle. That was the footprint of their main facility. So pretty big. It would have been interesting to see how that worked out, but it did.
The proposed substation, you're saying?
Yellow.
Yeah, yellow. And so it's sort of the one in the middle, because we had one worked out, which does impact the old Boise Park, by the way. And I believe the one we had before the solar stuff happened is the direction we're gonna go with.
So it's none of those on here that we're gonna go with.
No.
And
but
that's less impact than the one that we go back to.
yes, yeah.
Sorry, I just.
That's okay. Let's see, so current planning just means processing permits.
Yeah, you know about that. That's how Wilkins property, we reviewed that. This is for council, so they don't necessarily see the things that you guys review, so we included that.
Food, so we have been approving these food units with temporary use permits. And we had several renewals come up, and then we had some stuff happen that had us look at our sanitary sewer regulations pertaining to these a little bit closer. And that took a lot more time than we thought, but I think that's finally over with and helping these people get through. So the Columbia Commons commercial subdivision on the north side of town, Burger King is done. Fast Lube is pretty close to being done. They have a little bit of sidewalk access to finish. Dairy Queen isn't radio silence anymore. They're actually engaged with some permitting, still just on paper yet. But at least we know, okay, they're finally moving. And then the large parcel in between fast food and Burger King. Well, I talked to the owner. He has some ideas, but nothing solid there yet. And just some after pictures. Broadleaf Arbor is finally done after years and years of pushing paper and inspections. So we have these cool drone images. To kind of show finished, more or less finished product. Boulder Ridge and the Comstock subdivision, these are ones that you remember, 100 lots with these combined, and they both are on life support right now. They got time extensions. Boulder Ridge is looking for funding, and Comstock is looking for a developer that loves the property. Ridgecrest. Now, this is a planning commission decision back in 2007. That predates me, so I know it predates all of you. And so Ridgecrest was unique in that it started in the 90s and continued. And the unique aspect is when our wetland rules came into play. And that impacted these 6 lots. And so this is something we've been talking with them about for my entire career here. So over 17 years, I've been here close to 17. And I think we found a way to make this work based on grandfathered impact, some of the protection zone being retained. So we may finally get these last few buildings done. You know, this partition and the big old Douglas fir tree. This is on the northern side of town, south of the old Friesen Mill. You did a zone change on these, so.
And the variances.
And the variances, yeah, so the duplexes. The police station, we talked about that earlier. I wanted to mention the old food bank building. When this went up on the market, I was really worried about it. Who's gonna want this thing? What's gonna happen to it? It's just gonna be something everybody's gonna be mad about. And then McMullen, local company, it suited their needs, and what they were using it for didn't require any permits. So that was like perfect. The worry is gone. The Village Inn is still working on their 3-parcel annexation. I think I've talked about this last time. And then interestingly, one of those annexations that you looked at today, the Dahlgren one, creates the bridge to make Bing's, or now Happy RV, Family Fun RV.
I always think.
Contiguous to city limits. That was a consent from 2009. And so once these annexations we're working on now are done, can look at that property annexing. This is just a quick lesson in zoning. So this is a residential lot. And when we look at zoning, what's allowed as a principal use wasn't what is not allowed. Well, storage or parking as a principal use is not allowed. And so we have the situation, you saw the dump truck, you saw the fill. And actually the previous picture, I think, had the stop work order. Yeah, that one on the right, that's a stop work order for unlawful fill. And the fill issue was finally resolved this year. So it took 10 years and a few different owners. And we got a permit to put a home there. So sometimes it's just a matter of tracking it and getting it resolved as you can.
It's just 140.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, are you gonna be able to provide power to that? Because I was wondering.
I am, it's gonna be a pain, but.
Yeah, it's a far reach. I noticed that pole across the street.
It's, yeah, it's the thing none of us wanted to deal with for.
But on the positive, an old violation that's resolved. There's a positive. There's the Russ Hubbard project. And that continues to move. This is some pictures of the street frontage just loaded with utilities and encumbrances. We had to think differently about street trees and all that kind of stuff there. Another project that was finished, the Deer Meadow RV Park, this was in the county, it annexed, and it's done, another project done. Columbia River Fire and Rescue, with the previous leadership, it was just really weird, and so this was a sign issue, they put the sign up, didn't have a permit, but it was more than the sign, there was an attempt to get a temporary to get an electrical permit, to put a temporary building on there to say, hey, we have this training center here. And the issue is when Boise deeded this property to the district at a time when land partition law existed and there's no partitions, that's an issue too. There was a reverter clause that said if there was no training facility or plans for a training facility, then it would revert back to the owner. And this was an attempt by the previous leadership to say, hey, we have something here. And like, well, that ended in the early 90s.
Crazy, right?
This is many decades later, but thankfully, currently we have honored the rules, took the sign down. St. Helens High School continues to move, and one Easter egg is if you look at that lab picture, this has been resolved now. But this was, in process, you see 3 arrows there, which wouldn't make sense, but it was, like I said, in process. So the next 6 months.
Will that be done?
Next month, no, just kidding.
I don't know. I don't know.
Don't they have temp off or?
They have, yeah, because they have temp on for the main area, and then they're gonna work on other portions of the building. They just started their permitting for their turf fields. I think sometime in 2025, if I remember right.
There was saying something about building C was gonna be working on next, so they had to kind of move people out of a building to the new building and then work on the old building.
And I haven't been tracking it that closely. I just know, oh, time for a temporary occupancy, so I talked to the super about the expectations for the area, and they met him, it was.
Mostly sequential, basically.
And then in the next 6 months, basically code stuff and a lot of the things we kind of talked about before, so.
It's all project management. Urban Renewal, EOA, Riverwalk, ODOT Community Pass Program, and the CLG grant are all coming up in 6 months that are gonna take up a lot of my time.
But we always like to update this for our purposes, and then, well, we might as well, here's what we have, if people wanna look at it, what the heck does this department do? Just gives some of the stuff we're looking at the short term and the long term.
Great Cliffs in water facility. That's that Marine Board thing, right?
Yeah, I think we were waiting for the dust to settle on Sand Island, and the Marine Board actually just granted the city a bunch of money to repair our existing docks. There was some damage to one of the booms, debris booms. There's might be a better term for it, but it was like a $250,000 grant that was just awarded. So they're showing St. Helens some love,
I was out on Sun Island with the Marine Board.
Yeah, I remember.
Writing up all the violations.
Yeah.
The northern dock approach needed, like the approach ramp needed to be redone for one thing. That's better.
It just takes the back burner when there's other important priorities.
They kind of wanted to get those things resolved before they went.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what they told me.
That's what I had understood too. So that's why it's in the yellow.
Yeah. It's not resolved yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The planning commission annual report for the city council.
Yeah, so this is something we do every year.
And one of us does it, sometimes you do it for us.
Yeah, so the one question is, do you want to do it? Usually it's staff, because nobody wants to, and planning commission, you kind of know what you're gonna work on generally, and especially now with the proactive item. It's usually not, it's not a mystery like maybe other.
Anybody want to do the reports to the council?
we like to prepare the numbers.
I don't either.
Which are fairly comparable. And that's just kind of interesting stuff to look at. All the proactive items listed now, including the courthouse plaza. There's a question about future project plans. And I think we kind of have that pretty well covered. That's, you think we should include anything else? That's one of the questions. And then another question is, what can the council do to support the commission? So in the 2003, last year's report, and I think it was in the 22 report as well, the commission talked about having an associate planner for the upcoming fiscal year. And that's because of the budget, it's kind of absurd now. And I don't know if it's worth keeping that in there. I know before, that there was well, we got to keep talking about it. And also, the 5-year period of go, constant stress. Every week is hell at the end of the week. Why am I in this business? I look across the river, the heavy equipment school. Why don't I do that? So that ended in November of 2022. That nightmare, and it really was a nightmare, but we survived it. So because of the fiscal impracticality, and we're kind of, it's not the same boom where we're at. I don't know if it's appropriate to keep that on there, but you could, just for the messaging that someday we'll need it. So there's a question there. And then the other thing was being more involved. I think that has improved significantly, especially with the joint meetings. And we can continue to keep that in there. If you just want to keep that constant message, that's fine.
And I think on the associate planner, one way to phrase that differently might be to say, continues to recommend an associate planner at a future date where that becomes fiscally viable.
Yeah, that's better.
Because I think there's utility in not having it completely escape people's radar, that there have been periods where the workload is in excess.
Two, and then they can cut one and say they've saved 50.
That's right. We want to. They met us halfway.
Strategy.
That's right.
Okay, so at a future date when fiscally feasible.
Yeah, I mean, the city wants to be booming, so economically, and what if we are? Then what? We don't have enough planners.
Yeah, it could happen. It's all cycles.
We just also have a lot of city-led projects. I mean, you see how many grants and large-scale projects and city-owned projects. Like, planning has a part in all of that, so.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah.
So then I assume then the desire to continue their involvement in city-led projects and more included, given the consistent.
They continue to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said, yeah.
Okay.
Continue.
So keep that.
Continue the inclusion.
Desire more continue the inclusion rather than more inclusion.
Yeah. Yeah. Involvement and inclusion, yeah. But that's a city-led project, so I mean, things that we're working together with the city council and talking about in joint meetings or city projects. Because I guess that's the lead, right? Planning commission and the city council leading on wherever it is, right? So city projects, do you know what I mean?
I think it's city-led as opposed to like privately driven, right? Like, you're already reviewing, development proposals from the private sector. So I think that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's where the city-led part, we have control over those and can involve you and get feedback.
But we could have a city vision that colors the private development if the city chose to do that.
Yeah, and that would be like a city-led comprehensive plan update.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so it's still a city-led project, is
I
my,
guess so.
yeah.
How about the commission desires to continue their involvement? Period.
You can shorten it to the commission desires to continue.
The commission desires.
That's it.
Short point.
Many things.
We could just say, in city efforts,
Sure. Yeah.
or be a little more.
Not project, but
Continue to include it.
We'll work together.
That sounds good. Any more comments on that?
All right.
Okay, how you feeling? Do you feel like you still have mental capacity to finish these code amendments?
I don't think those are that long with it.
short.
Yeah, it's,
I did most of them.
you know.
All right.
You wanna take like a couple minute break? Would that help?
Yeah.
Just a snack break?
Most of the heavy lifting's done.
Yeah.
Oh, we did it last time.
Handful of push-ups,
All right, 9 o'clock.
couple jumping jacks.
We need it done in 4
All
minutes.
right.
By myself. 30 seconds.
Oh, you're gonna take advantage of the.
I've been there, actually, they have the 2 for $5 Whopper G. I don't eat fast food, so that's sense. I very rarely eat fast food, like tonight I'll be out.
Look at that Burger King.
You need to get out of it.
Not a burger though.
What about American Pie?
And then did not.
Have you ever thought about that? Sir, of course. All American Pie?
American.
Right, how do you?
24 hours, hot deli, I've been inside there.
It's nice.
We had it hot deli.
$1,000.
No, a lot of people would eat there. It's really nice inside.
Candy bars that sold $50 and something. No, now I know they make their money.
You.
Yeah.
I had kids when Mine's not for 8, but it's.
Oh, I am 11 to 7.
Nice.
That's it. That's all I get.
All day.
Mine is one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
Chemotherapy.
Protein shake.
That seems like
You're
people.
starving, right? I'm starving. And all these people are eating right.
They all have snacks.
It's so rude.
I'm sorry, that's
It's
awful.
fine.
My sister.
You need a snack, bro?
They're really.
Yeah,
I can't have any snacks. Is it?
He's intermittent fasting.
It's after 7:30.
Oh, that's a bad.
I can't,
And all these people are.
Fasting.
One. This one?
I can start and then.
Roll back.
Is this up here with it?
I have the, it's on here. That was one. Yeah.
I brought my paperwork from last time.
I did not.
Shout out to bottle of bonds.
Yeah,
Great, that's even further along.
yeah, it's way along.
So like what, 30 minutes?
9:30.
Oh, I wrote stop here, page 24.
Yep.
So, do
Where,
Okay, is that big enough for everybody?
did you put on here what was left?
No, that's a separate issue, that's not a
Oh,
small one.
Yeah,
it was noted in there.
I talked about where we left off in the first, section of the memo. And then, there was another thing that came up we wanted to talk about. And then I parked it.
wow. Well, let's get into it.
So we'll start with the memo.
Oh,
Get all that for.
Well, we want to get it to us. So one question that came up last month when we talked about the Riverfront District, Plaza Sub-District. And as a reminder, this zoning district is a small area basically focused around the plaza, and so. You know, if I was gonna draw a box. That's terrible, well, I'm having a hard time. I'm not gonna torture, oh, this. There you go.
you just put your thumb over it, say it's under my thumb.
Yeah. But it's generally this area, so a small area, and one of the questions was, why did we include, congregate care facility in the listed uses? And congregate care facility is basically, a type of, semi-supervised elderly housing. And the reason I did that is the Mill Sub-District, which is the old veneer property, has that included. And I guess I thought, well, if it's here, why don't you allow in the zoning district too, so they're adjoining. There's nothing that says we have to do it. There was some question and possible concern. And I'm okay just taking it off.
Jennifer had concern about it.
And if we didn't take it off, then we would probably change it to congregate housing to match some of the other zoning listings. So that was, I didn't have the full answer last time, so I wanted to go back to that. See how you feel about it. The sentiment I got, at least from, was, yeah, take it out. Okay, nobody disagrees with that?
I think that's fine. I'd be a little surprised if there were a lot of people clamoring to build a concrete facility down there, so it'll be okay.
Okay, so, and then, another thing that was not in the amendments before, but some things happened since the last time that got Jenny and I to think, I don't know if people's actions are meeting the intent of the code. So when you build on a lot, we have our setback requirements and our lot coverage requirements. And our code says that when you put in a new detached accessory structure, or it could be a second detached home, it could be a building addition, then it allows a little bit of fudge factor in that it allows a reduced yard for the addition and a little bit of an increase in lot coverage. And the idea is that, okay, you have a home that was built and some time passes and the person wants to do an addition or something, and that way, you know, you have a little bit of flexibility to think about things, you know, later on. A home could last decades and decades and decades. And what we've seen a couple times, and the catalyst behind adding was there was a realty listing that said, the deck isn't built yet, we need to get occupancy, and then we'll immediately apply for a permit, basically to get that reduction. And we're like, well, that's not really meeting the intent of the code. And then there was another couple builders who said, well, that's stupid. Why don't you just give us the reduction immediately? And I'm like, well, that's not really the intent. And so I think there needs to be a delay. And so we're saying, at least here, and you know, part of the discussion may be what that delay should be. But in order to use that deduction, the applicable structure has to be in place for at least 5 years.
Pull out of the hat, that'd be.
And that way, it's not just a turnaround and
The
get
day
a permit
after.
immediately
Yeah.
after, it's something that's been there. And my fear is that people, oh yeah, we can just get a permit immediately after, and people start to use that for that initial construction, which really isn't the intent of the code.
Yeah, the exception is going to swallow the rule. So I guess the question I would have is, if we've got these restrictions on yard coverage and setbacks and whatnot, why do we have an exemption at all?
It's to not punish people who have an old home and not want to do a remodel. Like, that's how I've always thought about it. It's to give, because sometimes you get someone come in and they just want to build a small addition and they're just slightly over setback requirements. This gives them a way to reduce it without a full public hearing if it's a couple of feet.
Okay, yeah, because my other question was going to be whether people would just apply for variance, but this is, yeah, a way to do it without a full hearing. I mean, yeah, I think if we're gonna do that, having there be a 5-year period is better than having people apply for it right away.
And I've seen it under 5 times a year. I would say we use this part of the code. It's pretty rare.
Do you have some language for the city, why 5 years?
Well, I thought about a variety of time periods, 10 years, well, that's kind of long to track. Thought about 1 year, but that's kind of a quick turnaround. Thought about 2 years, well, maybe 2 years is okay, maybe 4 years, 5. 5 just seemed like a good number to start the discussion with. I don't think we're hell bent on it being 5 years. It could be, I think logical numbers would be 5, 4, or 2.
But up on one of the first things you said there, be hard to track.
10 would be,
Yeah.
maybe not have building records or something.
Yeah, but I'd say we would write rules, it was like, there's no point in writing it that way if you're not gonna be able to monitor that, you can't track it, you can't enforce it, because like a state park, for instance, redoes a trail, impacted a wetland, they need a permit for that. Because it's over 50 cubic yards, or maybe it's 25 cubic yards in the state, okay? Then they redo a bridge 2 years later, and that's like 28 cubic yards. It was really difficult for me to say, have they gone over 50 cubic yards? And I'm like, okay, it's just per project, so is that a different project? So it gets really fuzzy, you're trying to do these cumulative kind of things. Anyway.
And 5 years seemed like, well, it gives you a nice span of time, but it's not too long to make it more difficult for us to track.
So how would you keep track of that time? Even 5 years?
We would do a permit search.
You would
See
do
what
that
the existing footprint of the house was at the time. that-
anytime someone wanted to remodel, you normally do that anyway?
No,
This
if
would
they wanted to use
this
this
would trigger that.
exception, they would have.
Yeah, it's basically, they would apply for the exception, right? And
Yeah.
you would, yeah.
Start talking over time.
And we have, we have a lot of aerial technology that's out there now with Google Earth and the time span, our own aerial photos. So we have a lot of stuff that can work. Also, the assessor tracks footprints. So that's a resource as well.
Everything's online now, so the access to information is so much faster. I find it seems like a very common time for like a prorated share of somebody hooking into a sewer or power or that kind of thing. It's used 5 years.
State, we did, after violations over 5 years. For the most part. Because then the appeals court would say, you didn't care about it for the last 10 years, so why do you care about it?
So we just wanted your feedback on it. No staff, you're being too mean. We agree, but we think the time should be different, or we agree as written. or something else.
I do not think you were being too mean, and I think as written, it works fine.
I think it's good to have a time on it, up there a bit.
Anybody else?
You could kind of confuse myself. I mean, stupid question. You're trying to do this because of the older homes, give them a chance to comply if they want to do an extension. That's it. And this is for something that's been recently built, not.
Well, it's being used, the problem is it's being used for something that was just built, not something that's been in place for a period of time.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure
I hear you saying.
it truly applies to something that's been in place for a while. And that's why we're talking about this 5-year delay for when this exception can be imposed or utilized.
It's implying a minimum amount of time. It could be in place for 80 years and use this exception too.
Yeah, so it's at least 5 years.
Just wondering if there's a different way of approaching it.
What would be,
Not sure.
Yeah, there's probably a multitude of different ways.
You want to think about it too, and it's not set in stone.
But but I think dealing with it differently would probably involve a rewrite or trying to use the framework of our code and tweak it rather than rebuild it.
I'm just thinking that maybe if we have a certain date of buildings, like something that's 20 years, old. And you just have anything that was built before this, like 2000 would be allowed to build at any time, and anything after that.
Yeah, that's a potential approach to take that says, this is the cap date.
I think the question is really, from your perspective, is the purpose of the rule to address modern needs that may not be met by objectively older homes, or is it to allow over time, as time proceeds, to allow homeowners to modify their use space use?
Yeah, I mean, this code could be around for a long time. That wouldn't allow a home that is 5 years old in 20 years, the ability to use this exception. So there would be a downside to that.
I think if you to avoid this coming up again and again, it is nice to just have a year period. 5 years is too short. You can make it longer. I do understand that poses some trackability issues.
this is related to setbacks, not
Setbacks and lot coverage.
lot coverage.
Setbacks and lot.
So,
Yeah.
if they max out their lot coverage and they still want to add something in over 5 years, they could come in and talk to you at least about it. There you saying? So not just setbacks, but lot coverage. So what did it really talk about just a little bit?
Oh, 20% at the very beginning. Or 5% for lot coverage.
Okay.
Say just a little bit.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, so for an
Okay, gotcha.
example,
Yeah.
if your setback is 10 feet, you could reduce it by 2 with this exception.
If you have a lot coverage of 40%, then that can go up to 45%.
so that would be an administrative decision.
No variance.
Yeah.
They have to justify it, or you just get the exception.
It's just through the building permit. At the counter, they say, I want a building addition. We look and go, oh, you're in R7. You're only 7 feet now. They start pouting and then going, wait a minute. Yeah, this 20% off deal.
So just so we're clear, this is already in place. We're just wanting to limit 5 years.
Yeah, so you don't have this immediate turnaround. We don't think that really meets the
Well, I see what you're saying, yeah.
We think the building should be in place.
Yeah, it's already there.
For
We're talking a lot about this and it's not really.
Sorry, bro.
Okay.
All right,
Okay, so,
move on.
so we don't have, and most of the amendments left are not too hardcore. So we left off, parking. And, really what we're doing is just including the single room occupancy stuff. And if you recall before, single room occupancy means you have sleeping units and then you have shared lavatory, and or cooking facilities, stuff like that. As Rosengard pointed out before, it's kind of like a dormitory of sorts. So we're saying that, we're treating single room occupancy similar to multi-dwellings, so that's why it's included there. Actually, that's everything in 1780-20, including that single room occupancy stuff. And then in the next section, minimum off-street parking requirements, we are just making sure manufactured dwelling / mobile home park reflects some of the other amendments that we did. And then single room occupancy, 1 space per unit, which is similar to studio apartment. Now you could say, 1/2 space per unit, but we kind of talked about 1 space at some prior meeting and the commission seemed to agree. It's just now in writing. So the next under is civic. This is just changing the title of the type of use to match state law per the childcare stuff that we talked about earlier. And then public safety services, this is like a police station. Actually, this is something learned from our own police station exercise, where it talks about people on the largest ship, but it doesn't address the public area. And like, well, you know what, this should really be in the code, and that 350 square feet is pretty commonly used for things like offices and stuff, and so that's why we chose that number. So if you had a police station, for example, and you had a lobby that was open to the public, that 350 per square foot would apply there for your parking, and then the rest would apply to employees, because those kind of facilities, though they may not attract a lot of public activity, they may attract some. So that's the parking, not a whole bunch. Any questions on that? Nope. Okay, signs. We talked about changing our time periods, and that's all we're doing with the sign. Site development review. So the first one, these are the things that are exempt from site development review. And we are expanding the definition. It kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. We would have to treat duplexes, manufactured homes, and prefabricated structures the same anyways. We're just making sure our code aligns with that. And then the second one, if you recall the last meeting, the types of things that we need to allow in manufactured home parks, which is broader than what we could allow on standard building lots, like prefabricated structures and even RVs. And so we're referencing that section, because you wouldn't require a site development review to replace one of those legal type of livable units in an RV space. And then family childcare home better reflects the current definition of childcare stuff per state law. And then the next one, 1796-40, just that time period stuff that we talked about. And then the next section, including our single room occupancy stuff in there. Because we're treating them similar to multifamily. The next one, again, that single room occupancy stuff. And that pertains to the shared recreation areas that you would have in multifamily development. Distance between buildings. Now, this is important because we have our definition of multifamily, which is 3 or more. And if you recall, our current definition of multifamily is 3 or more in buildings that have at least 3 units. And we're talking about breaking that up to say 3 or more units on a lot that in some cases may be detached, attached, or a combination of the two. That helps us with our cottage cluster rule. And so one of the things I thought about, well, if we have a cottage cluster, does it make sense to have 25-foot separation between the buildings because they have windows? It's kind of hardcore. And probably too hardcore for the intent of allowing those. And so it's changed to when those greater distances between buildings and stuff apply is when it is a multi-dwelling structure. So when the structure is 3 or more in the structure itself, that's when it applies. As opposed to being units of 1 or 2.
Sure.
And theoretically, those buildings are going to be bigger. And that covers most of that. We have an interior yard now, and so this wall separation, we're just substituting that with our interior yard, which is defined as separation between buildings. That's the bulk of that. Any questions on the site development review?
Excuse me. We're through 217-100.
That's where we're at now, yes.
Okay, well, I just looked at the language of something on B above there, I believe. We're looking at horizontal dimension, it's just language. And then we have 60 feet, and then we have height. Wouldn't it be to be consistent with that? Wouldn't it be the horizontal dimension and vertical dimension? Just it's just language, but it just doesn't seem. It doesn't seem to jive with me, I guess.
Oh, yeah, no, that would be an improvement. Yeah. So 30 feet in height or vertical.
Or exceed 30 feet vertical dimension.
You would have to say height.
You'd have to.
You wouldn't have to.
Right, yeah, I think you're saying the same thing. So-
Yeah.
We could say vertical in parentheses just to make it clearer. It wouldn't hurt.
It just seems odd to me reading it. That's the only thing. Move on.
Yeah, I'm pretty used to odd.
Change horizontal to width.
Yeah.
That's one or the other, just.
Yeah.
It's trying to be consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the problem there is you would get in arguments with people, oh, that's not the width, that's the length.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you get the, well, this word means that, it's a budding, it's not a budding, you know, so we get
Go to
into.
what he said and change the
Well, building height.
height to.
Building height is defined,
Yeah.
that's why it's used.
Okay, well, if it's a term of art, then there we go.
Remember when I first started consulting.
It stopped us at that.
We had plans, I was working with the planner on a master plan for Columbia Slough Trail, stuff like that. And so I went through and I just made it more interesting to read, right? But it wasn't planneries. What are you doing?
Yeah, we live in a world of a distinct language. So is everybody happy with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Satisfied, Scott?
Sure. That was right after I said it.
Okay. I wanna make sure. Tangents. So conditional use permit, time period stuff that we've talked about, and then we're adding, psilocybin service center. And then, we're adding some rules that say, you can't manufacture psilocybin on the same property. This is something that we talked about at some point in the past. Then this time, place, and manner stuff. I can't remember that. Several months ago.
Sounds good, whatever that means.
Just confusing enough.
Any questions on the conditional use permit? And I can give you a better answer on that. I can email that to you if you want on that, Shockompao state and local law, additional more restrictive time, place, and manner conditions may be imposed. I just can't remember that statute. I'm sure once I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what we were saying. Or you can just trust us.
Seems obvious to me.
Well, so the conditional use permit standards allow time, place.
That's easy.
No, we're nearly done. Don't understand. Okay, home occupations. We're adding family child care home as something that is exempt because we can't require a home occupation for that. And just some basic language change. Good. Self-explanatory. Accessory structures, tree removal, land division, subdivision, all the prime stuff that we talked about.
Yeah. This is it.
And then also lot line adjustment. And then the last two things. We talked about this, the plan development overlay. We actually had a pretty good discussion about it.
Yep.
And that's reflective of that discussion. So it's not forever. And we talked about having a date in there. And I have January 1st, 2025, because I know this will be adopted before that. If this gets way delayed, I'd probably change that to a date that is past the point of adoption. But I anticipate this being adopted in the fall. And then it's good for 10 years. And if it's not used, it goes away because it's this floating zone, if you remember. And then at the very end, last page is about the easiest as can be. In the comprehensive plan, we're adding an I. So it's not just M, it's MI. You better match.
Okay.
Urban nerd thing.
Oh, that's right, it was,
Yeah.
That doesn't match our
had
LW.
the wrong names in there.
And that would conclude the preliminary review of the code. So my next step will be revising it for the discussions that we've had. And then getting it before the council, so they can bless, to proceed legislatively. And
Thank you.
all the more public hearings to look forward to.
Yeah, does the commission have anything to address on the proactive items that we discussed at this point? Okay.